Boris Johnson promises Ukraine the military equipment it needs after holding surprise talks with President Zelensky in Kiev.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 10th of April. This is Breakfast on GBNews with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, on your radio and online. Coming up for you today.
In his unannounced and surprise visit to Ukraine, the Prime Minister commits to sending 120 armoured vehicles as well as new anti-ship missile systems.
The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick on her final day in the job. Our Home and Security Editor will look back on her time as the head of the biggest police force in the country.
And 3 businessmen have paid $55 million each to become astronauts and stay for 1 week on the International Space Station. If you had $55 million, would you spend it on that or something else? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, get in touch this morning. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. $55 million.
$55 million a ticket. I mean, they trained to be astronauts as well, but $55 million each.
You see, I'd love to do it, though, wouldn't you?
I'd love to do it, but if you had $55 million, is that the right way to spend it?
Probably
or,
not.
given the state the world's in, isn't there something better to spend it on? Although it would be very tempting if it's pocket money to you.
Yeah, I don't know. If that sort of money is pocket money, heck, how much have you got?
I know. Well, but it's been a week of revelations like that, hasn't it? People with enormous amounts of money in the world. I mean, we all know it's true, don't we? We all know there are people in the world who are fantastically rich, fabulously, or maybe even obscenely rich.
Yes.
But we've been brought face to face with them in the last few weeks.
Hasn't Elon Musk just become the richest man in the world? I think he's just overtaken Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame. So, I mean, there's some serious...
And we were hearing that
there.
Rishi Sunak's wife, sorry to keep rubbing it in on Rishi Sunak's wife, because I know they're both fed up with their money being talked about, but she's richer than the Queen. And we always thought the Queen was... I mean, the Queen's the Queen, but we always thought the Queen was fabulously wealthy.
Yeah.
They could afford $55 million to take a ticket to the International Space Station. But would we consider that the right way to spend that sort of money at the moment?
Not if it was them. You wouldn't say that was the right thing for them to do. However...
Claudia Winkleman is wearing a jumper that cost her £2,675. A jumper.
For a jumper. You see, stuff like that is crackers. There's absolutely no sense in spending... Sometimes you can spend a bit more on clothes and you're getting a better material or a better cut.
It is cashmere, but it's tie and dye cashmere.
I mean, what's the point of that? I just think it's crazy.
It is. That's what I mean. I think it's a bit obscene. It would be lovely to hear from you with your ideas of if you had $55 million almost to spare, if it was sort of pocket money to you, or if you won it on the lottery, what would you do with it? Would you do something really, you know, like a lot of people do, stupid?
I could buy 25 of these suits for 25 of these suits. No, for Claudia Winkleman's jumper.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it?
Mind you.
If you've always had a lot of money, maybe you just don't see that as a big deal. If you've just won that amount of money, and I, probably like you, over the years have interviewed many people who've won a fortune on the lottery then lost it, spent it so fast.
I mean, that's it. I always think it's why now, so with Camelot and all that sort of thing, they have all these advisors, don't they, apparently, not that I would know, who descend on you if you win big on the lottery to help you sort of manage your money. Because I can understand why people do go bonkers, but it could run out surprisingly quickly.
It runs out very quickly. Well, I mean, we're hearing Boris Becker spent his entire fortune. Yeah. Every penny he ever made as one of the best tennis players in the world, the golden boy of tennis, has got into such financial problems, but he's lost every penny of that fortune.
That must be awful.
Well, anyway, that's our question to you today. Yes. We'd love to hear from you. If you had $55 million, what would you do with it? Truly, honestly, what would you do?
GBViews at gbnews.uk. And now, our main news today, and the Prime Minister has pledged support for Ukraine as he made a surprise visit to Kiev for talks with President Zelensky.
Downing Street have confirmed now that Britain will send 120 armoured vehicles and new anti-ship missile systems, promising Ukraine would get what it needs to stop another Russian attack.
What this war is certainly producing is a clarity about the vision of a future for Ukraine, where together with friends and partners, we, the UK and others, supply the equipment, the technology, the know-how, the intelligence, so that Ukraine will never be invaded again, so that Ukraine is so fortified and so protected that Ukraine can never be bullied again, never be blackmailed again, never be threatened in the same way again.
Now, whatever you think of the Prime Minister, and I know from all the messages you sent in, you're on both split on that one. I think it's hugely impressive that he's been to Ukraine. I mean, it's still technically a war zone, isn't it? And there he is. I mean, obviously,
he's the first leader. He's the first world or country leader to actually go to Ukraine and walk down the streets of Kiev with President Zelensky. And I think that really was very symbolic, very historic, actually.
I think so. What do you think of that one? Love to get your thoughts on that. And of course, the pledges that he's made as a result of that. And we're sending an awful lot of money and an awful lot of weaponry. Quite what we're doing with it, quite what the armoured vehicles are, I don't know. But I mean,
did you see people coming out of their homes in the streets of Kiev and were coming out? They wanted to see him. They congratulated on being brave Boris, they said. And one lady gave him that the cockerel. Did you see that?
Oh, yes.
Apparently the cockerel, or this it's a piece of porcelain, I think, or something. But the cockerel has become very symbolic because it was pictured as being something that was still on a shelf after a whole apartment had been bombed. And this lady had bought 2 of these cockerels, and they were actually water containers or wine containers. And she gave one to President Zelensky and one to Boris Johnson.
So,
yeah.
It's gestures like that. Let's hope they are treasured by both those leaders. Yeah. I'm sure they will be. Well, let's head to Kiev now. We can talk to journalist and chief editor of Ukraine World, Volodymyr Yermolenko. Good to see you once again. Look, what do you make of the Prime Minister's visit? How important is it that someone as high profile as Boris Johnson went to meet President Zelensky in person?
Hello, I think it's very important because basically the presence of the leaders right now in Kiev, in Ukraine, it's extremely important. We have seen some of the visits in the past days. It was very important that the President of the European Parliament visited, and a few days ago, the President of the European Commission and the Chief of EU Diplomacy visited Kiev. Also, they visited Bucha. So the visit of Boris Johnson is, in this respect, very symbolic. It says that Kiev is coming back to normal life, and that world leaders are not afraid of visiting it. You have probably seen, you are now seeing, I think it's on your screens, that Zelensky and Johnson had a promenade on Kiev, not only around the presidential office, but also going down to the Kiev Central Street, Khreshchatyk, and even going to Maidan, the very symbolic place in Kiev where our revolutions took place.
I wonder what Russia thinks of it. What do you think? Because they will see these pictures too, won't they?
Well, I think they will understand once again that many international society, international community, Western community is supporting Ukraine, and people are not afraid. That's very important. Not afraid of visiting Kiev, regardless of the fact that Kiev can be bombed at any moment, and Russian missiles can hit Kiev at any moment, because we in Kiev have experienced missile strikes several times. And of course, this is also a very symbolic gesture and very, very important. And by the way, I would say that Boris Johnson showed himself, I would say, much better than some other leaders of the European countries. We are, for example, thinking about France and Germany, who are not yet visiting Kiev.
Does this mark a turning point, do you think, in the conflict? Is this a sign that it is all but over for Russia?
No, there is no turning point. Of course, the key events will depend on basically Ukrainian army and its capacity of a battle, because, okay, Kiev is liberated. Kiev battle is the big victory of the Ukrainian army. Also, the northern part of Ukraine, which is now liberated from the Russians, that's already a big Russian defeat. Let's be serious about that. But Russians are concentrating their efforts to the east and south of Ukraine, and there will be most probably a big battle in April, early May, because Russians will try to get a victory for them until the 9th of May, which is for them a very, crazily symbolic date of the victory in the Second World War. And therefore, the help of Britain in terms of what you announced is very important. Armored vehicles are needed to bring more troops to the battleground. They are very important. That's what Ukrainians were asking for. And anti-ship missiles, anti-ship systems are very important, because Russians are shelling Ukrainian cities from the Black Sea and basically blocking the Black Sea, blocking Ukrainian ports, and Ukrainians cannot export basically their goods, and this is also ruining Ukrainian economy. What we need more is air defense systems, and I don't know the details, but maybe this is coming too from Britain.
That's certainly being spoken about. I think what happens, we don't know. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And those amazing pictures of Boris Johnson and President Zelensky are on the front pages of all of the Sunday newspapers, as you can imagine. I mean, yes, you can say that that's a coup, I suppose, for Boris Johnson, but my goodness, what an incredibly symbolic picture for President Zelensky.
I do think it is really important. I mean, it is symbolism, as Volodymyr was saying, but symbolism is important.
Yes,
And
very much so. They've got to keep morale up for a start.
It rallies the troops, it rallies the people, and it makes a very public statement. So
Yes, to other countries as well, to other NATO countries, that maybe they should be stepping up a bit. Boris has stepped up, hasn't he? Would you agree? Let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to think so.
I think so. I think he's stepped up. Well above the others who have been hovering on the fence.
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt where Boris Johnson and now where the UK is on supporting Ukraine.
OK, it is 12 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with the other headlines. And Ukraine says over 4,500 people have been evacuated through humanitarian corridors. Meanwhile, officials are urging civilians in the eastern region of Luhansk to flee.
Pakistan's parliament has ousted Imran Khan as Prime Minister in a vote of no confidence. Speaking before the vote, he rejected calls for him to resign, accusing the West of a conspiracy to oust him over his recent visit to Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
Scottish Labour has accused the SNP of gutting local communities after it emerged libraries have lost out on more than £250,000 in the last decade. The party says cuts to local government funding means annual spending was 36% lower in 2020 than it was in 2010.
And after a 20-hour flight, the first all-private astronaut team has docked with the International Space Station in an historic mission. One former NASA astronaut and 3 paying customers are on the SpaceX rocket. $55 million a ticket.
Now, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked the outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner on her final day in the job.
Dame Cressida Dick quit after Sadiq Khan criticised her handling of racist, misogynistic and homophobic messages shared by a group of officers based at Charing Cross Police Station in London.
Plus, of course, a series of other scandals which have plagued the Met during her time in the post. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, looks back over her career.
As Scotland Yard's first female commissioner, Cressida Dick was always assured of her place in history. But the country's most senior policing role is never far from controversy. It is the most political of policing jobs, where issues managed are often of national significance. And straddling the demands of a Labour mayor and Conservative Home Secretary only add to the complexities. But for Cressida Dick, it was a series of scandals within her force that chipped away at her authority, ultimately leading London Mayor Sadiq Khan to withdraw his support.
But I'm not going to hide from the fact that I lost confidence in her. I'm not going to hide from the fact that we've had in our city a series of devastating scandals overt racism, sexism, misogyny, discrimination, homophobia. We've had trust confidence from Londoners in the police service at rock bottom, and that's one of the reasons why I lost confidence in her, and it's one of the things I'll be looking for in a new commissioner, how they will address some of these serious issues that, frankly speaking, the current commissioner failed to address.
Much of the recent pressure on Cressida Dick followed the fallout from the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by one of the Met's own officers. As appalling as that was, it was compounded by the Met's handling of the subsequent vigil, which descended into scenes of violence. The murders of sisters Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman in a North London park brought further outrage after it was revealed two of the officers who should have been guarding the murder scene had taken selfies next to the sisters' bodies. The final straw came after the police watchdog published messages sent by officers based at a central London police station that used sexist, racist and homophobic language. With Sadiq Khan's refusal to back her, the Commissioner, who'd managed to ride out previous controversies, had no choice but to resign.
He has left me no choice but to step aside. I say this with deep sadness and regret. Undertaking this role, a Crown appointment, as a servant of the people of London and the United Kingdom, has been the greatest honour and privilege of my life.
Cressida Dick agreed to stay on while arrangements were made to find a successor, but today she finally leaves her post.
Right, on the floor, please, on the floor.
Among rank-and-file police officers, there was widespread support for a commissioner who, unlike some of her predecessors, was largely seen as having their backs. But ultimately, it was the behaviour of some of those officers who brought an end to the career of Scotland Yard's first female commissioner. Mark White, GB News.
Well, we're joined now by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Morning.
Good morning.
Do you feel sad for her or not today? I don't know. I'm completely on the fence of it. I see it. On one hand, is it misogyny, the fact that she's a woman and we're blaming her for everything, or is she to blame for a lot of it?
It was quite astonishing, the outpouring of affection that she received on Friday. I mean, universally, not only from Met officers, but from a lot of senior officers in charge of other forces. I've never quite seen that affection and respect shown for any police officer. It was astonishing. Now, that's fine, of course. If you've worked with or under Cressida Dick and you respect her, then fine, of course, we live in a free country. Heap the praise upon her. But for me, that casts a bit of a concern, because this slavish, blind loyalty to the person who's been in charge of the Met, when there have been so many scandalous incidents that have happened on her watch, for me, cuts to a deeper problem within policing, which is a refusal to look in the mirror and accept their wrongdoing.
So what is going wrong in one sense? Is it a case that they've been recruiting the wrong people?
Well,
as simple as that.
Quite possibly. We know there's been a recruitment drive to get an additional 20,000 police officers into the UK police forces. Of course, driven by the fact that so many were lost during a decade of austerity. Now, have they lowered the bar in order to hit that target? Because the Prime Minister's been very vocal about getting 20,000 officers in. Possibly. I know there have been problems over vetting, and in the Met they've recruited a lot of people to try and deal with that and resolve it. Are there concerns about training? Yes, there are. It's not like back in my day, and I get it that I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but you spent 16 weeks at Hendon at the old training school there, being very much immersed in the entire kind of culture, from shining your boots, pressing your trousers, into the levels of behaviour that should be adopted. Of course, it wasn't a perfect world, and a lot of wrong ones crept through in those days, like they clearly have done today.
We should be able to stop wrong-uns getting through, though, nowadays, shouldn't we? I mean, they should have sharpened up their act. We've known about this for some time.
One would like to think so, because problems in policing are as old as the hills, and you would like to think that in a modern workplace those matters could be addressed. Sadly, there have been so many quite frankly ghastly incidents of officers being arrested, from the horrors of the Sarah Everard murder through to only 2 weeks ago when more officers were arrested in separate incidents for offences of a very sexualised nature, which is deeply, deeply concerning.
Yeah, I mean, you go from those horror stories through to just simple bad policing. You think of the Sarah Everard protest. Appalling policing of that protest. Or it wasn't a protest, it was a vigil, wasn't it? And, I mean, who's to blame for that? The blame has to land with the boss, doesn't it?
Ultimately, yeah, the buck stops somewhere. And I think the drip, drip, drip feed of such catastrophic news stories about the Met is eventually what led to the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, almost setting a trap for Cressida Dick, which she couldn't avoid, and which ultimately led to her resignation.
What about these calls that we mentioned in our introduction to Mark's VT, you know, the messages and they're called misogynistic and homophobic and racist, and there are people, I've heard people say, well, is this not just letting off steam? Is this not just a bit of banter?
I had the huge misfortune to read almost all of those messages, and they have no place in wider society, in any workplace.
Or that bad?
Let alone amongst those who we trust to keep us safe, to protect us, to operate to a higher level of behaviour than we have to. And that's part of the deal when you join the police. You have to accept that you are going to be held to account, and your standards, quite rightly, should be higher than the average man or woman in the street.
Does all this mean that whoever comes in as a replacement, they're going to have to bring in absolute root and branch reform in the Met?
To a certain extent, yes, because there clearly has been a problem about culture and standards. And of course, Baroness Casey is currently conducting her inquiry into exactly that. I think when the findings are produced, whoever is the new commissioner, they are going to have to say quite obviously, we will take these on board and these will be incorporated into our everyday practices.
Are these problems unique to the Met? And is it because the Met is so big? I mean, you do hear problems with other police forces, but it's always the Met that we hear about most. Is that fair?
It is the Met by and large. Of course there is wrongdoing amongst other police services, but nothing of the scale and the worrying nature of what we've seen in the Met. Yes, of course, it is the biggest, so it will have a higher percentage
so is it too big
than others. No, I don't think so. I think it's set up and structured to be kind of managed on a local basis. But clearly I think there's been failings in that regard, because the most important rank in the police is the sergeant, because he controls the constables, of which there are most of those in any police service. And I think there are so many problems with regards to the lack of experience, because so many people have bailed out when the pension conditions were changed dramatically and not for the better. I think because of the training, the vetting, the recruiting, and all of these things need to be looked at very much in the round, and somebody come in, new broom, establish a culture and a set of standards which everybody wants to buy into. And where people are not afraid to call out the wrongdoing of others.
Look, we're out of time, Peter. I just want to ask you very quickly. This is all very unfair on those police officers watching now, or the families of police officers who know they are good people doing a good and difficult job.
And that is why it is so important to get it right, not only for the public, but for the good uns. And the overwhelming majority of police officers are indeed good, fine, upstanding members of society doing an incredibly difficult job in very challenging circumstances.
Peter Bleksley, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you. And do stay with us, because we've got plenty more to come, including we'll be looking at the reasons behind Imran Khan's downfall. First of all, though, the weather.
And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK. And that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
.28, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV and on your radio and online.
Yes, and we've been talking about the fact that for the first time ever, a totally civilian, private team of astronauts has gone up to the International Space Station. Everyone on board had paid their way, except I think maybe the commander, who's a former NASA
Yes, he got
astronaut.
He got it for free.
He was driving.
Well, he was driving. The driver didn't have to pay.
They've actually docked, though, now with the International Space Station, and those civilians are staying on board for, I think, at least a week.
Yeah.
They're doing experiments and things like that. So they've had to do some training. But most importantly, they paid their way, and they paid £55 million each for their ticket. And I was just
a lot of money.
It is an awful lot of money. And when you talk about all the troubles in the world at the moment, and we talk about the troubles domestically in the UK, if you had £55 million, is that the morally justifiable way to spend it?
The trouble is, and I know this is going to sound awful, but if 55 million quid is not going to solve any issues in the UK,
build a
never mind
hospital,
elsewhere.
55 million? Maybe not.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
Would it build a hospital, 55 million?
It would probably build it, but what it wouldn't do is run it.
No, all right. Well, there are ways of doing it, though. It just strikes me as such an incredible amount of money.
It is. Well, what would you do if you had that sort of money? Derek, morning, Derek, says, if I had 55 million quid, I'd use it to set up a website to teach blues, harp and guitar to vulnerable people all over the world.
Gosh, you probably could do it for an awful lot less than 55 million, though, couldn't you? I would have thought.
Well, he's got to keep in 50 million for himself.
Yeah.
It's just fair dues.
Well, is it? That's the point.
Yes.
Nowadays, at the moment, shouldn't we all be feeling a little more altruistic and trying to do something for the world or for the country? Nigel said, if I had 55 million quid, I would have arranged to have Boris's flight back from Kiev cancelled.
Oh,
Nigel.
Nigel. Lee Matthew Jackson, morning to you, says, I would instantly pay off all my family's mortgages. This is interesting. Pay my parents a salary for the rest of their lives so they don't have to worry about money. That's nice. I imagine the rest of the money would go into investments and we'd find ways of supporting the local community.
See, I think that bit's important, don't you? I do think that if you win or you had as pocket money, an obscenely large amount of money like that, shouldn't you have to do some good with it?
Well, I have to be honest, like everybody else, when you play the lottery, I dream of what I would do with the money.
Of course, yeah.
And it has never once occurred to me to invest it in the local community.
I've always thought I'd love to set up a fund that provides scholarships for kids to go to university or go to music school or something that they could never otherwise afford to do, to give kids a chance. I'd love to do that.
See, I may do that. I may do something like that, but I do just tend to think of, just having loads of money.
I suppose that's the amazing. If you won an obscene amount of money, would you tell anyone?
Yeah. I'll tell you what is interesting, and it's all about how happy we are as individuals. In my previous job, I played the lottery 4 times a week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Because I was desperate to win, so I could just go, right, that's it.
Is that what you do? Is that what you do? Is you turn up to work and just... Or you wouldn't turn up to work,
I just wouldn't turn up.
Maybe you just wouldn't.
I always said I'd go to the loo in a break and just not come back.
Not come back?
Because I was very unhappy.
Are you doing that
And
here?
now, I just...
Tell me now, are you doing it?
It occurred to me last night, and I thought, do you know what, I haven't played the lottery for months.
No, you see, you can't win it if you're not in it.
Yeah, but it's like, I'm not desperate to leave anywhere.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
So it goes to show, doesn't it? It's not mental health. I'm still happy as I am.
Yeah. Oh, I'm pleased about that.
There
That's
you go.
lovely. David says, I certainly wouldn't risk my life going into space.
Yeah.
I can understand that too.
Very dangerous.
I think I would.
Yeah.
Not for 55 million.
No, that's a lot of money.
Anyway, here we are with world politics again, and the future of Pakistan's government hangs in the balance after Prime Minister Imran Khan was ousted from office in a vote of no confidence. Last week, Pakistan's Supreme Court found the former world cricketer had broken the law by dissolving Parliament to stop that vote.
So before the vote took place, Mr Khan accused the West of a conspiracy to remove him from office following his recent visit to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
Well, let's get more on this from journalist and strategic affairs expert Dr Hamid Khan joins us now. Hello there, thank you for joining us. Was it a surprise to you? What's happened in the last 24 hours or so? Was that a surprise to you, Imran Khan losing his job?
Thank you very much. I mean, whatever happened in last 24 hours was not surprising, but whatever happened within last 7 days, it was full of drama and it was full of interesting events because on the 3rd of April, it was supposed to be the voting for the vote of no confidence. And the Deputy Speaker, took the rule out that under considering the Prime Minister's stance, that there is a conspiracy behind his toppling his government. So he dismissed that vote of no confidence movement, and that's why I mean the opposition has to go to the Supreme Court. And then there was after 4 days of hearing, there was a verdict from the Supreme Court that this vote of no confidence motion will take place, and it was directed by the Supreme Court to took place yesterday. And then the whole day we see a complete drama that there was a lot of delays and there was arguments and from the government bench, treasury benches, and then eventually it was voted. And prior to the voting, there was resignation from the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of Pakistan as well, because he said that he still believes that there is an element of foreign conspiracy behind the toppling the government of Imran Khan, and that's why it was chaired by another person and being a speaker, and eventually they won the voting, and Prime Minister is ousted with 174 votes against him, which was more than the required numbers.
So we're in a position now where there will be a new Prime Minister and potentially a new government in Pakistan. What is that likely to mean for the international community? Because Pakistan is, in terms of stability, is a crucial world player, isn't it?
Exactly, you're right, Steve. The thing is that now the government is going into the hands of the opposition, and this is not a one opposition. It is an alliance or coalition of about 11 political parties. So we have to see how would they work, what kind of working relationship they would have among themselves, and then they have to see how would they negotiate their foreign policy, because that is the most important factor for the previous regime, and that is going to be the most important factor for the current upcoming new prime minister, which is supposed to be Shahbaz Sharif, who was the leader of the opposition, and he is going to be the new premier. And I'll tell you, I'm very much convinced that Shahbaz Sharif would like to have much more cordial relations with America and with European Union, especially, and Britain as well, especially considering Pakistan's stance being neutral with the recent conflict of Russia and Ukraine. And that was one of the major reasons where he lost Imran Khan lost the trust from America and Europe and Britain as well. So this will be a very crucial time for the Pakistan foreign policy, that how would they take it further.
OK, look, it's fascinating to talk to you. Dr. Hamid Khan, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, thank you. Of course, he's a fascinating figure. You will wonder what happens next with him, because he said he doesn't want to continue in politics if he can't be leader, and he won't be now. And of course, he was globally, internationally superstar famous when he was a cricketer. You wonder what he'll do next.
It is interesting. I've interviewed him a few times. Unusual, difficult character, I would say.
Yes. But I don't think you become that sort of world leader without having edge.
Yes.
Anyway. He's certainly always had that. But
that's interesting. But internationally, the politicians are going to be watching this one very closely, I should think. Look, stay with us, because we've got plenty more to come, including a good look through the papers for you. So don't go anywhere.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
It is 6:39 morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne across the UK on TV, on radio and online.
It's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning, journalists Nabila Ramdani and Benedict Spence. And there's a lot to talk about today, is there not? Are we going to go through the not. Are we going to go through the headlines first? Right. We'll bring you up to date then with those. Boris Johnson, of course, big news today, has pledged economic and defensive support to Ukraine following face-to-face talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. The Prime Minister said he made his surprise visit to the capital as a show of solidarity for Ukraine.
We're showing you the papers for some reason. I tell you what, let's ditch out of those headlines because, well, it's all going technically wrong. The buttons are being pressed in the wrong order.
But that's all right. It's very early in the morning.
It is. It's what we do.
It's 6:40 already.
Adds to the fun. Nabila, let's have a look at the Sunday Express then, should we? Welcome to Kiev, my friend, was how Boris was greeted yesterday.
Yes, indeed, and it's about a story about two heroes, effectively, Boris Johnson and indeed Volodymyr Zelensky. It's effectively, goes on about Boris Johnson's heroic visit to Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. And, Boris Johnson has been, he's got a thing with of terminology and phrases. He's quite good at that, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
And he very much praised the Ukrainian leader. He said, "You have shown the courage of a lion." And Vladimir, you have given the roar of that lion. So it's, full of praise for the bravery of the Ukrainian leader. And
yes, he said to other world leaders, hasn't he? He said, "Be brave like Boris." Which is good for Boris, I guess.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It must have taken a degree of courage and certainly security organisation.
Oh, absolutely.
To land, the UK Prime Minister in Kiev for that meeting. And there they are walking through the streets.
Yes, indeed. And I think what's important here is morale-boosting visits to the Ukrainians by foreign leaders. They're extremely important, and especially if you get into Kiev itself. And they show that the Ukrainians are and they are defending the capital as lions, as Boris Johnson pointed out. But I think no matter what your views of Boris Johnson is, I think you have to admire, his bravery in entering a war zone where safety can by no means be guaranteed.
Well, especially, Zelensky is still a man with a target on his back, isn't he?
Yes, indeed. And it begs, the question if Boris Johnson was able to find Zelensky, so can Putin.
What do you think, Benedict?
I think that it demonstrates what a lot of Western intelligence has been saying, which really is that the Russians are pulling back from the north of the country. I don't think, because it's not just obviously Boris Johnson that we've seen. We've also seen Ursula von der Leyen visiting Mr. Zelensky. There's also been suggestions that the Pope might visit Kiev. I don't think that the Pontiff would be visiting Kiev, even this one, if there was any suggestion that the Russians still had the build-up of troops that they did. I think that's very clear that they are pulling back. It's very recent. It's a lot of these plans will have been made well in advance, but
they
nonetheless,
have to wait for their intelligence advisors
to guarantee it. Otherwise,
we think that's safe enough for you to
Yes,
go.
otherwise there's no way, I think, that anybody would green light the number of high-profile people. It's still dangerous now. It's not to say that it's not, but it's very much a sign, I think, that the Russians are taking stock of the situation and recognise that Kiev, whilst they can fight for it, isn't going to fall anytime soon.
Meanwhile, I was just going to, Nabil, I was just going to say in the Sunday Telegraph, Benedict, of course, it's looking at it's not just what happens now, it's what's going to happen in the longer term. And as far as NATO is concerned, strengthening that eastern front is going to have to be a priority.
It is in the north and the east. What this is talking about, this is an interview with Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, where he's talking about a number of things. The headline is obviously full-scale permanent NATO force, and it's talking here specifically about the Baltics, about Estonia and Latvia, which, of course, alongside Ukraine are places that Vladimir Putin and a lot of his acolytes have talked about not really being actual countries, they're being part of Russia. So that's the suggestion there, that there would be a full-time permanent build-up of troops to deter any sort of incursion into the area. Unrelated to this, there's also been lots of talk about Finland joining the alliance on a permanent basis.
Which
Finland
they never really wanted to do before.
No, and it's because, of course, Finland was invaded by the Soviet Union before and was able to, on the one hand, it was able to repel the Soviet Union, but it did lose a fifth of its territory. And so ever since then, Finland has been on a sort of a semi-permanent war footing, in a similar sort of way that Israel is, for example. They've got military service, they've got about 700,000 people on permanent standby. Every bridge is mined on the off chance.
Sort of on amber alert.
Yes, and I think that there is now a sense in a lot of these countries that it's a now or never situation.
This appears to be exactly what Putin didn't want.
Yeah.
strengthen NATO. And he seems to have done it.
Although
Having said that, I think the danger of placing NATO troops anywhere near Russia is, of course, engagement with the Russians, and any the slightest contact with Russia could be used as an excuse by Putin to launch attacks against NATO members, and then we're clearly looking at a World War III scenario.
I mean, I think it's very noticeable that a number of Eastern countries, though, are actually pushing ahead in spite of what their NATO allies are saying. Yeah, we already know that the US shot down the plan for Slovakia to send MiGs, but Slovakia want to do it anyway. The Poles are very, very sort of aggressive on this. They think that there should be no more sort of appeasement of Russia. The Czechs are sending tanks. And, this is coming, whilst other NATO members are saying, well, we should perhaps tread a little bit carefully. I think Russia's immediate neighbours are being a lot more assertive about this. And I don't think they're leaving their own allies in the alliance much leeway, no matter how powerful the US or Germany might be. Ultimately, if your partners are saying, well, this is the direction we feel that we're going, and here is Ukraine, for an example, I kind of feel that the rest of the alliance will end up being dragged along with them.
Wow.
What about your personal assessment of Boris actually doing this? Getting on a plane and doing it by surprise, landing there yesterday. What do you think?
Well, he looked
personally
incredibly calm and relaxed given the circumstances, but he was not there just to shake hands and for the photo opportunities, which clearly is the case because it's all on the front pages of the Sunday papers. But he went there and pledged more arms to the Ukrainians to go with the sanctions and indeed with the diplomatic measures. And it has to be said that the juxtaposition of that visit and also the pictures that are still coming out of the Ukraine, demonic pictures about, killings of civilian populations, it just reminds us how barbaric this conflict is, really, and that something needs to be done to put an end to it.
Does it change your personal assessment of Boris?
I mean, domestically, I still think he's been an abject failure, but he has, on the international stage, led the way, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. I think we always like to joke, didn't he, that he saw himself as a bit of a Churchillian figure. He has stepped up to the plate, actually, when that was required of him. And, so I think you can very justifiably say, taking the two things separately, he has been a real letdown for a lot of people domestically. But as a statesman, I think it's very difficult to fault him, no matter how much a lot of his adversaries would like to.
OK.
And even
I was going to say, your views on that would be very welcome. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Look, can we move away from the Prime Minister just a moment to have a look at the Chancellor in the Mail on Sunday, Nabila? I mean, they're saying that his political career is now on the brink. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, there's he's been having a very difficult week, it has to be said, and the Mail on Sunday is effectively saying that he's battling for his political career.
He's having to sort of make up his mind whether he wants a political career or not now.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there are astonishing claims that he broke US immigration rules, for example, that his political opponents are asking that the White House investigate why the Chancellor possessed a US green card until last October. The card puts the holder on the path to US citizenship, so he has to make up his mind whether he wants to be British or American. And if they declare their intention to make America the permanent home and indeed pay their tax there. So it boils down to a question of loyalty, doesn't it?
Well, he's already moved his family out of number 11, apparently, because they're so fed up with all of the recent publicity they've had. And the fact that his wife the focus has been so much on his wife and her money. And there are hints, I think at least in one of the papers today, that he may be thinking of moving out himself. Now, that would be the first time ever a Chancellor has not lived over the shop, as it were. Does that suggest he's really serious about the job anymore?
Well, I think it suggests more crucially that what treacherous career politics is, and I think he was the shining star of the Tory party a few days ago, but now he's come crashing down, and all, he's a fabulously rich man in his own right and indeed by marriage, and it doesn't sit well.
I heard an analysis quite some time ago actually saying that he's never had the lows before. I mean he's been in politics, sort of trundled along as if you like, and then had all the highs of the furlough scheme and everyone loving what he was doing, and now that it's gone the other way, he's
How long
not
do you
used
give
to
him,
it.
Benedict, in number 11?
Oh, I think actually he could hold on for quite some time. I mean, what I think is very interesting is if we were to, say, juxtapose this with the misadventures of the Prime Minister, who's able to sort of bat off anything at all. I actually think that if Mr Sunak wanted to, he could just batten down the hatches and that he would survive, because I actually don't think that, I think that it's very misguided what he's done, keeping citizenship or a green card of one country, or his wife not being domiciled in the UK. But I do think that these things are survivable. He's taken a bit of a dip in the polls, sure, because there is a cost of living crisis going on. We all understand why that is.
24 points.
But I do think,
a dip.
it is a significant one, but the Prime Minister himself is managing to bat back from a quite significant one very slowly. I think you need that kind of resilience. If you have it within you, I don't see why you can't drag it back. The Labour Party themselves have been able to, Keir Starmer started off with pretty low ratings and is slowly managing to pull this thing up. But I would say very quickly, it's interesting, isn't it? Because earlier on in the show, you were discussing what would you do if you had 55 million, would you go to the International Space Station? And, this idea that there are people out there in the world for whom this is sort of small change. Yeah. But what the Times talks about is that not being domiciled in the UK has saved the Chancellor's wife approximately 20 million in taxes. It may be not very much money to people like this, but very wealthy people don't get very wealthy or stay very wealthy by frittering their money away. So I do sort of understand why the Chancellor, he was very fabulously wealthy before. His wife is even more fabulously wealthy, her family is. He might be sitting here saying, actually, is it worth it? When actually I have everything in the world at my disposal to become and stay very powerful, very influential, away from politics. It's not the only route to power.
Having said that, I think there's more than a whiff of hypocrisy, because the British Chancellor is meant to be utterly committed to Britain's financial success. And the fact that we are seeing his wife, who appears to have more fiscal loyalty to overseas countries, not least of all her native India, has rightly angered millions of voters. I think, any politicians who qualify a defence by saying, we've done nothing illegal, then, they're in serious trouble.
Yeah. Well, look, we need to leave it there. Nabila, Benedict, thank you both very much indeed. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Rishi, just put your feet up. Relax.
Why take the
Have some champagne or something.
But as we keep saying, who would want to be a politician at the moment?
Don't know. Not when you've got that sort of money. Anyway,
go to the space station.
Go to the space station.
Just like that.
It is very nearly. Oh, here we go. 6:52 on the nose. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines. And Boris Johnson has pledged economic and defensive support to Ukraine following face-to-face talks with President Zelensky in Kiev. The Prime Minister said he made the surprise visit as a show of solidarity for Ukraine.
Together with friends and partners, we, the UK and others, supply the equipment, the technology, the know-how, the intelligence, so that Ukraine will never be invaded again.
Pakistan's parliament has ousted Imran Khan as Prime Minister in a vote of no confidence. He's been called to resign and he's been ousted, he thinks, over his recent visit to Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
Against all the odds, at 50-1, Noble Yeats won this year's Grand National at Aintree, ridden by amateur Samuel Cohen on his last ever ride. The 7-year-old beat 15-2 favourite Any Second Now by 2 1/4 lengths. Delta Work was third. Now, a woman from Scotland who's sponsoring a family of Ukrainian refugees says not enough is being done to help them arrive in the country.
Yeah, Aisla Mackay is offering accommodation for 2 sisters and a teenage girl at her home in West Lothian. Our Scotland reporter, David Donaldson, spoke with her about the journey the family made to get to Scotland.
So my family have had a really difficult journey through 5 or 6 different European countries. They've been travelling more or less non-stop for about 3 weeks. Our visa applications were submitted on the 18th of March when the scheme opened, and we are still waiting to hear back on those.
It's been some journey for them, I understand, as well, through numerous countries.
Yeah, so I've been in touch with the family since they left Kyiv. I think this was about the 16th or 17th of March. They ended up in Romania and then in Bucharest. From there they travelled to Budapest in Hungary. because of the volume of people on the move, there's, I think the volunteers are doing their best, but there's a real incentive to keep people moving on. So from Budapest, they were put on a train to Munich in Germany. And they were only able to spend a night or two there before they were put on a train to Bologna in Italy. And they actually spent about a week or so in Pesaro in northern Italy before flying to Ireland on Saturday morning. And they're now currently somewhere northwest of Sligo in some disused council building, being housed with another Ukrainian family at the moment, but they have no heating at all, and they're currently sharing a single bed, so it's obviously not an ideal long-term situation for them to be in.
You've obviously been in touch with the family all along the way. What's been the sort of conversations you've had with them? Difficult,
because they're scared they're running out of money. It's very difficult to feel that you're constantly being moved on. So at the back of their minds, they're always thinking, I've got another day here. Will the visa come through? Because then I have to move again. So that's been more or less the gist of the conversations. Are you okay? Have you got somewhere to stay? Have you been fed? Do you know what you're doing tomorrow? It's been really basic. I mean, we've had quite a few conversations, but very much around the logistics of what's happening and timescales and what's happening next.
Do you think enough has been done to try and get these people over here and into homes, or do you think it's a process that needs to be speeded up somewhat?
Undoubtedly, it needs to be speeded up. There needs to be more transparency and feedback as to where applications are. I mean, I've spent more than 8 hours on hold to UKVI trying to get information, and when you do get through to someone, they can't tell you anything. They can't see the applications, they can't tell you where they are in the system, they can't give you any idea of timescales, they can't tell you where everything is okay. So you're just guessing, second guessing what's happening next. The forms themselves, I mean, I believe they've been simplified, but they're extremely difficult to fill out for a family who are on the move, on a mobile phone, on a data package, on a train. Personally, I feel that that the entire process is designed to be as obstructive and difficult as possible. I do appreciate that security checks need to be undertaken. I don't see why. I don't understand why we're the only European country where people can't enter the country first and then we undertake these checks. It's just inhumane.
Let us know what you think. Stay with us, so we've got plenty more to come, including the Prime Minister's surprise visit to Ukraine. And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK, and that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Boris Johnson promises Ukraine the military equipment it needs after holding surprise talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 10th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
Of course, we are live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, on your radio and online. And coming up for you today.
In his unannounced and surprise visit to Ukraine, the Prime Minister commits to sending 120 armoured vehicles as well as new anti-ship missile systems.
The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner on her final day in the job. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, looks back on her time as the head of the biggest police force in the country.
And 3 businessmen have paid, wait for it, $55 million each to become astronauts and stay for 1 week on the International Space Station. We're asking, if you had $55 million, would you spend it on this or something else? Do let us know.
Yes, you can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm thinking
$55 million to spare, I suppose. What would you do with it?
a Rolex.
Really?
I mean, it wouldn't cost that much.
No, I was going to say, you could, several.
It'd be peanuts in comparison.
I
but
thought
there
you'd
you
be
go.
very keen on going up to the International Space Station.
Not for that price, though.
And
Not
isn't
for
there
that price.
something more worthwhile to do with $55 million? If you look at the world at the moment, if you look at the UK at the moment, isn't there a better way to spend that sort of money?
Oh, put it in your bank account and see the zeros clock up. That'd be very nice. Well, no, that'd be a lovely feeling. Tweet us if you like at GB News. Look forward to getting your thoughts on that this morning.
Actually, I've got quite a few views coming in on that. Shall I just...
Oh, yes, go on, go on.
Carol Fox, morning Carol, says $55 million. Well, the first $2 million to certain charities that I trust, nothing associated with the UN. Pointed.
Okay.
$3 million in a trust fund for my grandson and any siblings that he might have. $1 million to my son and daughter-in-law, $1 million each to my best friend and her 3 daughters. You'd still have an awful lot left over.
Yes,
Is there
good.
not something you should do with it?
$3 million for your grandson, but only $1 million to your son and daughter-in-law.
Something pointed there. Kathy
They'll be
says,
complaining.
Dear Anne and Stephen, the last thing I would remotely think of is to go into space. I've always wanted to do something for children whose parents or carers are unlikely to ever be able to support their dreams, even if it's something small. And that's Aussie Beth says the same thing. Good morning, Aussie Beth. Does that mean you're watching from Australia? She says, if I came into a large amount of money, I would perhaps set up a future fund for our children and grandchildren, but also set up an organisation to promote and support the education of children who are marginalised and most at risk of falling through the system. I personally believe that it is rather obscene that a single individual could have that enormous amount of money.
See, the problem with all that is, and I get what you're saying, but if you set up that sort of thing, which is admirable, absolutely is, 55 million quid, it'd last you, what, 5 years?
Not if it was invested properly and then went back into the fund, like a trust fund. 55 million would do a lot of good in a certain sort of trust fund.
It sort of would, but it would do more good in my bank account.
Think of the kids you could put through university or music college or something wonderful to do.
Is it really selfish? Am I being really selfish?
Yes!
I'm just like that. If I won that money, I would want that money.
You wouldn't need all of it, though, would you?
No, you wouldn't need all of it, but I mean, I might give, like, a couple of million away, but that would be it. That would be my limit.
I'd be your conscience. I'd be nagging you.
I wouldn't tell you.
No, you wouldn't, would you?
I wouldn't tell anybody. I wouldn't tell anybody
And that's
because that
the key, I
causes
think.
problems.
There are a lot of people with huge amounts of money who never tell anybody.
I wouldn't tell you. I'd just roll up here in a Rolls Royce, dripping in diamonds.
You probably wouldn't. You probably just wouldn't come
I know
into
I would.
work. You'd send me a text saying, you're on your own, kid.
I'd never do that to you.
Well.
Now, let's run you through the main stories this morning. And the Prime Minister has pledged support for Ukraine after making a surprise visit to Kiev for talks with President Zelensky.
Downing Street have now confirmed that Britain is going to do what Boris announced yesterday. He's going to send 120 armoured vehicles and new anti-ship missile systems, promising Ukraine would get what it needs to stop another Russian attack.
What this war is certainly producing is a clarity about the vision of a future for Ukraine, where together with friends and partners, we, the UK and others, supply the equipment, the technology, the know-how, the intelligence, so that Ukraine will never be invaded again, so that Ukraine is so fortified and so protected that Ukraine can never be bullied again, never be blackmailed again, never be threatened in the same way again.
Well, let's talk to former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram, who joins us now from Birmingham. Good to see you this morning. What do you make of the pledges from the Prime Minister? I was just working it out, actually. 100 million in high-grade weapons. If that was, for example, the Javelin anti-tank missile, I mean, that's just over 1,000 of them. So, I mean, it's not a huge amount, is it, in real terms?
Well, this is on top of everything else that's already been supplied into the Ukrainians. And remember, the UK has been supplying the NLAW anti-tank missile, which is similar to Javelin. Javelin's coming from the United States. But we've been supplying the Ukrainians with weapons before the Russians even invaded. And that's why the Ukrainians see the UK leading the way with the international community and the support that's going in to help them defeat the Russians. And with Boris Johnson's visit yesterday, I think he was the first G7 leader to visit Kiev and to President Zelensky. So, again, he's setting a precedent.
It's very interesting that he made that surprise visit yesterday. Other people on the programme have already suggested that means that military intelligence obviously thought that it was sufficiently safe for him to do so. And therefore, in other words, the Russians really have pulled out, at least of that area.
Yes, the intelligence picture is pretty good. There's an awful lot of effort by the international community being put in to monitor what the Russians are doing, and a lot of that is being fed to the Ukrainians. I know Boris Johnson, from anecdotal reporting, has been wanting to get into Kiev for some time now, and with the Russians pulling back from the north of Kiev, it has been deemed safe enough to get him in. And it was quite cheeky of the Ukrainian embassy to put it up yesterday and announce it by just saying surprise with a little smiley face.
Yeah, mind you can't blame them. I mean, in terms of morale, not just for the Ukrainian military, but for the Ukrainian civilian population, whether they've been displaced out of the country or not, what sort of impact does this have, and what message does it also send to someone like Vladimir Putin?
Well, for morale, it's huge. Your world leaders of international communities, and remember, the president of the European Commission had visited the day beforehand. That is critical to the morale of the Ukrainians, so they know that it's not just them fighting the Russians; it's the international community that's fighting the Russians, and it sends a very clear message to Vladimir Putin that the international community is coming together. And actually, I think the timings of the EU president's visit and then Boris Johnson going in, Putin's got this view that Brexit has caused a friction between the EU and the UK, and that's something that he's been trying to split even further. And this shows effectively a unity.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the pictures are obvious. They're all over the front pages of the Sunday newspapers here in Britain. They'll be everywhere else as well. And they will certainly be getting into Russia, won't they? This will give Putin a bloody nose. Just the very image of Boris Johnson and President Zelensky walking openly in the streets of Kiev.
It is, but the imagery getting into Moscow and being shared around Russia, I'm in touch with some journalists who work for Russian outlets on a daily basis, and they're petrified for having anything that isn't giving the Russian state's view of things on their devices. And if they see it, they look at it themselves and they delete it quickly, because the thought police are going around arresting people and locking them away. And these are trained journalists.
Yeah, I mean, that's the concern, isn't it? Look, in terms of where we are with this conflict and what Putin may now want to achieve to, in a way, hold his head up to the Russian people with this, it does seem interesting. Is now the time strategically for the West, in terms of their support, to really up the ante, a sort of final push, if you like?
We need a final push to make sure that the Ukrainians are prepared for the next Russian attack. And there will be a big attack coming in from the southeast to try and capture properly the disputed Donbass region. And the Russians are resetting that. They're resetting their command and control. They're moving their armoured formations around. And this will probably be a very large armoured formation move with lots of support from air and rockets and missiles and everything else. If the Ukrainians can blunt that, stop that, and start to push it back, then Putin is properly defeated.
And I wonder what will happen then. What happens then if Putin very clearly is defeated and driven right back into Russia? What happens then?
Well, this is where the real difficulty comes in, because Putin can't lose. Zelensky can't give a single square meter of Ukrainian territory. And we then get into a very difficult position where Putin may consider trying to wrestle the initiative back through other more violent means. But this is where all of the other diplomatic efforts, the economic efforts, the trying to influence China, India, Pakistan to talk to Vladimir Putin, to approach things from different angles are critical at this stage. So it's not just the military actions that are going on the ground. It's those combined with everything that's happening economically, the sanctions on the oligarchs and other things, and things that are happening politically, but not directly from necessarily EU and NATO leaders, but also indirectly through Chinese leaders, Indian leaders, and whoever the new Pakistani leader is going to be, to try and get Putin to back down.
Yeah, well, interesting weeks ahead, certainly. Philip Ingram, thanks very much indeed for your analysis there. It just made me think that in terms of the sanctions, which I mean, certainly causing some pain, quite how much we don't quite know, but if he was to retreat back into Russia, is that the point when you start easing sanctions immediately to try to sort of cessate him?
Well, you look at what's happened in the Ukraine. Doesn't he have to be punished? Doesn't the Russian regime have to be punished? Maybe that's too. You can't look that far in the future. I heard an interview yesterday with a Ukrainian girl. I say young woman, who for the first time in weeks has been able to get through to her own family, relatives of hers who live in Russia. And she managed to get through to them and have a talk with them, and they didn't believe her about what was happening in Ukraine. They are being given a completely different story. And that is truly upsetting to actually hear that. They were members of her own family, and they simply couldn't believe her when she was talking about what was happening in Ukraine.
That's worrying, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Being cut off from the rest of the world. We take it for granted.
Cut off from the truth.
That we have a free press and,
And that we have an internet now, which clearly can be blocked in certain ways. And as we were hearing there, trained, really experienced journalists who frankly are frightened for their lives if they are seen to be reporting anything other than what the Kremlin wants them to.
This is the problem. It's all about information is power at the end of the day. So I'd say we're going to have to watch the situation very closely for years to come, I would have thought, on this one.
Keep your thoughts coming into us, won't you? GBViews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @GBNews.
Oh, yes, indeed. Now, let's bring things closer to home, because the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has, surely with a pinch of salt...
That's where you need the air quotes, isn't it? He's
thanked the outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner on her final day in the job.
It's Dame Cressida Dick, of course. She quit after Sadiq Khan criticised her handling of racist, misogynistic and homophobic messages shared by a group of officers based at Charing Cross Police Station.
Plus, of course, a series of other scandals which have plagued the Met during her time in the post. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, looks back at her career.
As Scotland Yard's first female commissioner, Cressida Dick was always assured of her place in history. But the country's most senior policing role is never far from controversy. It is the most political of policing jobs, where issues managed are often of national significance. And straddling the demands of a Labour mayor and Conservative Home Secretary only add to the complexities. But for Cressida Dick, it was a series of scandals within her force that chipped away at her authority, ultimately leading London Mayor Sadiq Khan to withdraw his support.
But I'm not going to hide from the fact that I lost confidence in her. I'm not going to hide from the fact that we've had in our city a series of devastating scandals, overt racism, sexism, misogyny, discrimination, homophobia. We've had, trust confidence from Londoners in the police service at rock bottom, and that's one of the reasons why I lost confidence in her, and it's one of the things I'll be looking for in a new commissioner, how they will address some of these serious issues that, frankly speaking, the current commissioner failed to address.
Much of the recent pressure on Cressida Dick followed the fallout from the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by one of the Met's own officers. As appalling as that was, it was compounded by the Met's handling of the subsequent vigil, which descended into scenes of violence. The murders of sisters Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman in a North London park brought further outrage after it was revealed two of the officers who should have been guarding the murder scene had taken selfies next to the sisters' bodies. The final straw came after the police watchdog published messages sent by officers based at a central London police station that used sexist, racist and homophobic language. With Sadiq Khan's refusal to back her, the commissioner, who'd managed to ride out previous controversies, had no choice but to resign.
He has left me no choice but to step aside. I say this with deep sadness and regret. Undertaking this role, a Crown appointment, as a servant of the people of London and the United Kingdom, has been the greatest honour and privilege of my life.
Cressida Dick agreed to stay on while arrangements were made to find a successor, but today she finally leaves her post.
Right, on the floor, please, on the floor.
Among rank-and-file police officers, there was widespread support for a commissioner who, unlike some of her predecessors, was largely seen as having their backs. But ultimately, it was the behaviour of some of those officers who brought an end to the career of Scotland Yard's first female commissioner. Mark White, GB News.
Controversial figure indeed, for so many reasons. We're joined now by former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Very good morning to you. Thanks for coming back in. She is controversial. She's Marmite, isn't she? Some people absolutely adore her, and others think she messed things up badly.
Hugely popular amongst the rank and file, and also many senior officers, the length and breadth of the country, that on Friday were just diving onto social media to heap praise upon praise on Cressida Dick. But of course, there have been catastrophic incidences during her time in charge of the Met Police, and they simply cannot be ignored. And of course, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan was not going to ignore them. And ultimately, he kind of set a trap for Cressida Dick, which she simply couldn't avoid when he said, I'll give you a very short amount of time to turn around public trust in the Met Police. And of course, how can you ever really measure that? What, you have an opinion poll and ring people up and say, do you or don't you trust the Met? She really couldn't avoid that. The writing was on the wall and she was gone within days.
I mean, what has she done wrong then? What has been the failing that has led to this?
What has happened on her watch is a deeply worrying series of events, criminal events, committed by serving Metropolitan Police officers. Of course, the most shocking and ghastly being the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard. Just a ghastly crime. But there's been a litany of other cases, officers arrested and convicted for rape, amongst other things, indecent exposure, indecent assaults, uplifting, so many incidences that have a sexualised nature.
Yeah, and reports of a culture amongst officers that was sort of almost acceptable.
Which, of course, it isn't. It's 2022. Not that it was ever acceptable. But clearly there is a lot of work to be done. Baroness Casey is currently carrying out an investigation into the culture and standards within the Metropolitan Police. It will be very interesting to see what her report brings forward. Certainly there will be recommendations attached, and I'm sure that whoever is the next Commissioner of the Met will have to say that 100% we are going to implement these reforms.
But it's going to be very difficult to do. I mean, whoever takes over next, it's almost a bit of a poisoned chalice, isn't it? Because if there are institutionalised problems or long-term recruitment issues, and these people are already in the force, the bad apples, however many or few there are, it's going to be very difficult to find them and weed them out, isn't it?
But yes, possibly. But, the head of the Metropolitan Police is not only symbolic, but it's a very important role in so much as that if the rank and file are on the side of the Commissioner, that can have a huge impact on the organisation as a whole. It's one of those quite unusual jobs in that people can work 30 years in the Met, never meet the Commissioner, but they will slavishly be loyal if they think that's the right person for the job. So in that regard, I think if the Commissioner comes in who's got the right personality, can put their stamp on the organisation and says, do you know what, to all the overwhelming majority of cops who are good, upstanding, terrific people, let's find these wrong-uns. Let's root them out. If you are a whistleblower, you will not be seen as a troublemaker. You will be embraced. You will be valued, trusted, believed, and you can do all of that in strict confidence.
Fancy the job yourself, Peter? I think you'd be quite good.
I think you.
I've looked at the application criteria and I don't quite fit the bill.
We've been talking money all morning already, and apparently her golden handshake, which is seen by many as generous, is £166,000, but it's a third of what she might have got if she'd eked out her time herself. Apparently she's already arranged for £40,000 to give to a domestic abuse charity, so it's clearly something she feels very strongly about.
And absolute credit to her for that. I strongly suspect there'll be a publisher taking her out for lunch tomorrow.
Yeah, very likely.
That would be a book worth reading too.
Peter Bleksley, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you. Shall we bring you up to date then with the news headlines? And Ukraine says 9 trains are ready for evacuations from the Luhansk region. That comes as over 4,500 people have been already evacuated through what they call humanitarian corridors.
Scottish Labour has accused the SNP of gutting local communities after it emerged libraries have lost out on more than £250,000 in the last decade. The party says cuts to local government funding means annual spending was 36% lower in 2020 than it was in 2010.
Well, do stay with us because we've got plenty more to come, including all the Premier League action with sports presenter Aidan McGee. First of all, though, the weather.
And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK, and that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
(7:27) morning to you. Now, voters in France go to the polls today for the first round of the presidential elections. Emmanuel Macron is hoping for a second term, having long been tipped to win.
However, recent opinion polls suggest his main rival, Marine Le Pen, has now narrowed the lead, and it sort of could go either way. Joining us now is politics journalist Peter Allen. Hello there, Peter. Hi.
Morning. Hi.
Bonjour. Right. Thought I'd throw that in. It is looking like a much, much tighter fight than it has been of late. Who would you put your money on?
Well, at the moment, I would say that Emmanuel Macron is expected to win. He's been a reasonably good president for 5 years. There's a lot of support for him within the country. But in the last few days, really, opinion polls have started to point to a move towards Marine Le Pen. Remember, today, there are in fact 12 candidates standing, so it's not certain that these 2 candidates will win through to the second round in 2 weeks' time. That's what's expected. And it would certainly be a political earthquake if Marine Le Pen got through. She's been trying for many, many years. All of us remember her standing for election and losing elections. Again, over 20 years, she took 5 attempts to get into Parliament. She only became an MP in 2017. Her party is a minority party, the National Rally. It only has 6 MPs, But it's a quirk of the French system that a strong, charismatic individual can challenge to become the most powerful politician in France, and indeed one of the most powerful politicians in the world. So again, it would be absolutely staggering if Marine Le Pen won through. It could happen. It's unlikely to happen. But we'll know tonight which two candidates for sure are going through to the crucial second round in 2 weeks' time.
So we say it's staggering, and I get what you mean. It would be to an extent, but Marine Le Pen and Jean-Marie Le Pen, her father before her, I mean, there has been this appetite for the further right side of French politics for a very long time. They've always been in the spotlight, haven't they?
Very much so. I mean, there's been a appetite for far-right politics in France going back throughout the post-war period, really. A lot of people, for example, who would have collaborated with the Germans during the Second World War, a lot of Vichyist people who supported the Vichy regime. They've been around since the war. France is, of course, a former colonial power. There's a lot of right-wing sympathy. And parties like what was the National Front, it changed its name to the National Rally in 2017, but it's still pretty much the same party. These parties reflect that right-wing sentiment. Remember, there's another candidate standing today, Eric Zemmour. He's even more to the far right. He has 3 convictions, criminal convictions, for spreading racial hatred. France has, some would call, a problem with the very, very far right. Some would say it's a good thing. It reflects the views of millions of ordinary French people. It depends how you want to look at it. But that's what certainly what the Rassemblement National represents. As you say, Steve, there's been lots and lots of attempts by the Le Pens. It's a dynastic party. It's a family party. Officially, we don't speak about Jean-Marie Le Pen anymore because he's a convicted Holocaust denier, an anti-Semite, and all those kind of things. His own daughter has disowned him. But I have to tell you, speaking to a lot of people in the National Rally, a lot of people still quite like him, and a lot of people still quite like his views. So that's what we have here in France. And today we're going to have to see if they do get through to the second round, and indeed if Marine pulls off this miracle and wins the presidency in 2 weeks' time.
There's no doubt French politics is always colourful. Thank you very much indeed. We'll wait to see who does win it, whether it's either of those characters, actually.
Well,
watching from this side of the channel, you do get the feeling that France is generally becoming a bit disillusioned with Macron, don't you?
You get that impression. Whether that is going to prove to be the case, I don't know. But he's certainly not performed very well in terms of the Ukraine situation, has he? Trying to put his head above the parapet and talking to...
he tried his bit with Putin.
He tried his bit, but nothing worked out.
No,
he was giving reassurances that never turned into anything. So whether that's going to play against him, I don't know. OK, let's have a look at the sporting news for you this morning. As always, our very own Aidan McGee is here. Morning. Morning. Excuse me. All right. Better than Man United.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the manager or the coach, the interim coach, Ralph Rangnick, was moaning yesterday and saying, you know, does this side actually deserve to be in Europe? They're so far off the pace now. Tottenham making good strides yesterday, of course. Arsenal losing. Now, that's a difficult one for Arsenal because they've shown excellent form since Christmas, but 3 defeats in 4 has let Tottenham right back in. Manchester United well below that. They looked out of sorts yesterday. Everton, huge win for Everton as well, pulling away from the relegation zone. We discussed it yesterday with Esther and Phil, who obviously got connections with Merseyside. They want Everton to stay up because it's good for the area. They've never been outside the Premier League. If a club that size falls out of the Premier League, they really do fall hard. You know, you're talking about mass redundancies throughout the club. So a huge win yesterday. Frank Lampard looking as if he might be turning things around then. Elsewhere, Chelsea winning 6-0 at Southampton. We talked about how they had a couple of defeats in the last couple of games, and we were beginning to think all the stuff that's been going on with Abramovich was beginning to get into the dressing room, and players don't need many excuses to start dropping their level, but they stormed back yesterday. Good leadership from their coach, Thomas Tuchel. Had a meeting in the week saying, let's not be too worried about these 2 defeats. Let's go and do something special. 4-0 up at half-time at Southampton. Not a bad side at all either, Southampton. So Leeds as well, stepping towards safety. 3-0 win at Watford. A brilliant day in the Premier League yesterday. And, of course, we've got today Manchester City against Liverpool.
It's a big one.
It's enormous. It's enormous. As I said, I was at Manchester City the other night, and it's almost like they were taking it easy against Atletico because this game is so big. We've got these 4 fixtures City have got, Liverpool have got them as well. It's Champions League, Premier League against Manchester City, back in the Champions League, and then they're playing each other again in the FA Cup. So it's for both of them. These 4 games represent the season. Make no mistake.
If Man City win, they're almost guaranteed to take the league title.
Yeah, I would say, well, whoever wins, I would say, because I mean, we're in an era now where these 2 teams are so good. These are probably the best 2 teams in the world, and so when they sneak ahead, expect them to lose a game or drop points in the last 7, 8 games of the season. It doesn't happen anymore. It's not like in the old days where you look at it and think, well, there's a fixture there, there's a fixture there. They might lose that. These teams are so good that you could back them to see it. You could back them to win 15 games in a row, never mind 7. Although I sat here at Christmas time saying it was all done. Man City went 14 points clear on January the 16th when they beat Chelsea 1-0. They had that lead clawed back. So they do drop points. They dropped a lot of points against Liverpool, but I tell you what, it's going to be fascinating. 4:30.
It'll be a good game, won't it? 4:30, is it?
4:30. It's been a massive weekend of sport, Anne. Absolutely.
I know. Talking of the Grand National.
Great story.
The winner.
Here we go.
Is a 7-year-old, right?
Yes.
No.
And they said that's really
the horse, though, not the jockey.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the horse. Yeah. Well, you have to get that right.
But we don't know, do
No,
we?
I don't know whether that's unusually young for a horse to win or unusually old. I don't know.
That's quite young, actually. That's quite young.
But
I mean, the story was that Sam Whaley-Combs was, he's a friend of William and Kate's. He was credited with helping
Bringing
them get
them back
there.
together?
Yes, exactly. He doesn't talk about it because respect to the couple, but he's widely credited when they had problems early in their relationship as being the man who brought them back to line. So I mean, I suppose the country owes him a debt in a way, don't they? But Noble Yates was the one. He's the first amateur to win the national since 1990. It's a hell of an achievement. He's got 250 dental practices, employs 4,000 people. What an accomplished individual as an amateur to when he won the Gold Cup 10 years ago. He's won the national, and he's running this business.
And this was his
4,000
last
people.
ever ride, wasn't
Correct,
it?
yeah.
He wasn't
50
going
to
to
1.
do another race.
We've got a very lucky floor manager in here who 5 minutes before the race put a fiver on and won £300.
No.
Yeah, it's 50 to 1.
I think he's going to take a couple of weeks off.
Jack?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's Jack or not. I'm not sure.
It's Jack, yeah.
Is it Jack? Yeah.
Yeah, you put a fiver on, he's got 300 quid.
That's not too
But
bad.
that's how, I mean, can you imagine if you'd put much more on, you would have made quite a winning yesterday.
My horse finished 3rd.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's all right.
That's not bad.
No, I didn't put the money on because I didn't have any confidence in my.
Oh no, you don't bet though, do you now?
Don't. But yeah, that was a great achievement. His father only bought the horse 2 weeks ago.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's an investment, then.
Story, isn't
It is, and that's what we like. I spoke to Alistair Stewart yesterday. He said it's about we're losing track of we're so obsessed with stats and analysis these days in sport. We forget about the personalities. We forget about the stories. We had a great one last year with Rachel Blackmore. Her horse fell, I think, actually, the Minelli Tiger, I think it was.
Oh. Yeah.
So that was a bit disappointing, but nonetheless, it's thrown up a story, and that's what we like to see.
Well, it is. A bit of gossip then. How does he know William and Kate?
I think he went to school with Kate back in Hampshire, I think it was.
Yeah.
I don't think she went to... I think she went to school down in Winchester. I think she might have done, yeah. So that was interesting. Just to wrap up on the Masters as well, Scotty Scheffler, big day today. We had moving day yesterday.
Yeah, Tiger's not doing so well.
No, he had a bad third round, unfortunately. But still, he's come a long way. Remember, there was only Tuesday less than a week ago. We didn't even know he was competing, so he's done well.
But it doesn't look as though he's going to win this time.
No, he's not going to win, no. But isn't it interesting how we've got this great story at the top and still we want to talk about Tiger? That was the concern. Everyone said that he's such a big personality, whether he's winning or not.
Star name.
Exactly. And just to
go for
round
a hair
up as
trick.
well.
No, we're out of time, Aidan.
Sorry.
You've eaten all your time. Dear
it's
me.
really interesting.
We can't get rid of him, ladies and
sorry.
gents. He's terrible.
He'll be back, though.
He will be back. We'll see you later on. OK, stay with us. We've got plenty more to come, including all the day's newspapers, so don't go anywhere.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Hello and welcome back. It's 7:40 or roughly 20 to 8.
20 to 8.
Thank
you.
Thought I'd translate.
Oh,
to
yes.
new money. You're watching Breakfast on GBNews with me and Stephen.
Let's take you through the papers this morning. We'll start with the Sunday Express. Welcome to Kiev, my friend. It's a story on the Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine.
Yes, picture that says it all, really, isn't it? Whilst there, Boris Johnson pledged new arms, including military vehicles and missiles, as The Observer also focuses on his surprise visit.
A full-scale NATO military force could be permanently deployed to defend the borders of Europe, according to plans revealed by the chief of the alliance. That's in the Sunday Telegraph. It says a sufficient presence is required to repel a Russian invasion.
The Mail says Rishi's on the brink as friends say he could quit to spare his family being dragged through the papers.
The Chancellor's wife has escaped 11 Downing Street, with the Times describing it as a goldfish bowl.
You'd think they'd have thought of that. It's time to go through the papers now, though. Joining us this morning, journalists Nabila Ramdani and Benedict Spence. So what are we starting with?
Oh, a bit of Sunday Express, Benedict.
Yes, very upbeat story. Biggest increase in homelessness in centuries in the UK. Yeah, it's not good, is it? But it's entirely predictable, given everything that's happened over the past couple of years, the pandemic, the economic impact of that, and now what we're seeing, cost of living crisis. As The Express says, this is Lord Bird, who's the founder of The Big Issue, writing The Express, says more than 16,000 families and children are being evicted from their homes every month. So it's not just rough sleepers that we're talking about. We're talking about sort of the systemic movement of people from their homes into far more precarious situations. And of course, we all understand why this is. People are finding it much harder to meet their rents. Rents are actually going up. There's inflation to talk about. There is also the knock-on effect that we're seeing amongst young people, which is a generation of people who are renting permanently rather than being able to own their own houses, so have even less security.
There's generations of young people sofa surfing.
Yeah.
As well, which is it's one of those issues that something has to be done.
Yes,
and it's going to cost a lot of money. But nevertheless, it's got to be done.
Is it only a socialist government that would address this?
No, I don't think.
Nobody in the Tory government at the moment seems to be addressing this.
Well, I don't really know. The problem is, what can you do other than build more houses and sort of create a better economic environment? Now, the government, I'm sure, would say, well, we're doing our best, but are they really? A lot of people would say that, this government has not taken house building seriously. But actually, show me a government in the last couple of decades in this country that has taken, be it Labour or Conservative. This is, again, it's something that it doesn't seem to matter what side of the coin you are. A lot of that has to do with issues at a local level, local councils preventing people from building houses and preventing sort of a return to industrialisation, finding more jobs for people. So you do have to look at it in the round. You can't just say that it's a central government issue. Local government, councils, everybody has to take their share of responsibility.
There's a heck of a lot of home building going on near me, and I'm a sort of rural Oxfordshire area, which sounds very posh. And you think, oh, this is good. There is actually some house building going on, but they all seem to be very expensive houses.
Yeah, well, of course, there's not very much money to be made in affordable housing in the especially if with inflation.
But that's where you need government intervention.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. You do need governments, local councils stepping in to say, no, this isn't acceptable. You can't simply build property for the sake of increasing the value of the property, which ultimately seems to be the only motivation for house building in this country at the moment.
I mean, I got stopped by someone outside my local town centre last week. And you meet people all the time, don't you, who are homeless? And I always try and stop and talk to them. This was a young man, I don't know, 19, 20, and he was desperate. He was absolutely... He wasn't just asking for money, he was desperate. And, you know, I just found it really hard, really difficult, because it's just like, what on earth has happened with his family life? Never mind what job or money or income or anything. What's happened with family life for him? It broke my heart.
It's incredibly sad, and meanwhile, you also have stories in the papers about first private individuals going into space. So you would think you have so many chronic problems down here on Earth that all these, you know, space tourism effectively seems all a bit irrelevant when individuals are prepared to pay literally astronomical sums.
See, that's what gets steam coming out of my ears. I love anything to do with space, and I'd love to go up and to visit the International Space Station if I could. But when you hear that people have been paying $55 million for a ticket up there, you think, if you've got that much money, at the moment, shouldn't you be doing something more worthwhile with it?
Let's look at the Sunday Telegraph, Nabila, and the French elections. Interesting your take on this and where Marine Le Pen could fall. I mean, there is a chance at least that she could win.
Yes,
or get through to the next round, at least.
Yes, well, today is the first day of voting in the first round of the French presidential election. There's an interesting story here in the Sunday Telegraph about how young voters are shifting towards a Marine Le Pen vote, and which is actually giving her an unexpected election boost. There's a YouGov poll survey that has been conducted over the past week showing that 56% of those aged between 18 and 24 would vote for Marine Le Pen in the runoff. I have to say, I've just spent the week in France going to various meetings, including national rally meetings, of which Marine Le Pen is the leader, of course. And I've only seen elderly people, so they might not turn up at the meetings per se, but they might have sympathy for that view of the world. And to me, it seems to be going against the grain of what young people's attitude should be about liberalism, believing in progressive ideas. We're talking about a party that was literally founded by soldiers fighting in the Waffen-SS and who, you know, have a very distinct historical support for colonialism, and you think that young people might move away from such ideas in this day and age, but...
It's a disillusioned youth, I think, a lot of it, and it's just kicking against the status quo, which I can understand. Look, sadly, we've got to leave it there, you two, for now, but you are going to be back a little bit later on. Nabila and Benedict, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's talk a bit more about those millionaire astronauts. After a 20-hour flight, the first all-private astronaut team has docked with the International Space Station. The mission is being hailed as a milestone in commercial spaceflight history.
Now, one former NASA astronaut who's, we think, driving.
Yeah.
And 3 paying customers are on the SpaceX rocket. They're 250 miles above Earth for 8 days of science and biomedical research.
Yeah. Let's talk to space expert Andy Lound, who joins us with more. Hello there, Andy.
Good morning.
Good morning. I mean, I can see that it really is a milestone as far as space travel is concerned, because for the first time ever, we are seeing a commercial venture right up to the International Space Station. And if you put aside the fact that there are billionaires who actually have so much money that they can spend it on a very expensive ticket to space, is there anything else going for it? I mean, I suppose this means this is, again, a step forward in commercial flight history.
Yes, the important thing here is about the billionaires being able to afford it. Is quite an important element here, actually, because this isn't the joyrides up into space for tourism for the sake, oh, I have been there. This is very different. These 3 people who have paid to go onto this mission are actually bringing a whole host of scientific research with them to be carried out, work that needs to be carried out by universities. So they're working with universities, such as universities in Tokyo and the United States, which the universities themselves couldn't afford to fly on the space station. So these people are actually doing it for them and going up to do the research. And that's why this is an important milestone, because usually we see the state paying for these kind of experiments and research and things like that, which, to be quite honest, with pressures down here on Earth, governments and things have money to spend on other things, and that's really where now the private sector is beginning to take this over a little bit. So that it's kind of research into technologies. For instance, there's a very lightweight small air purifier, for instance, being tested, which would be important for space flight in the future, but could also be used down here on Earth. Medical research into stem cell research is carrying out there in their aging processes. So there's a lot of research which they would filter back down onto the Earth and go back into the systems down here on Earth, which is very important for health of the people down here on Earth. But also you're seeing that Axiom...
Forgive me for jumping in, Andy, but I mean, is this an indication now, because this is a turning point in many respects, so a very expensive one, are we now seeing the point where actually, you know, the government-funded space research in this way is, well, it's not going to stop, but it is winding down, and the commercial sector are well and truly taking over?
Yes, I think we're seeing that this is a big change. And the change has become because of the low cost to orbit, which is relatively low cost to orbit, which is happening. And that cost is going to fall in the next few years, which means that commercial enterprises can go in and think, well, actually, it's now affordable for us to go into low Earth orbit and carry out this research and do this material so that we can come down onto Earth and make it a profitable business, whether they're manufacturing drugs, whether they're manufacturing equipment or not. So it's becoming affordable for the private sector, which allows governments, therefore, to get involved in other projects which private industry won't, because it's just not cost effective for them. And that's really quite an important step change. The equivalent to this is, say, like the airline industry. When aircraft started to really fly, it was only for those people who got plenty of money in the 20s and 30s, or in fact for the military. But of course, by the 1960s, everybody near enough was travelling on an airplane. And by now, you can get a cheap flight to go into Europe and back again quite easily. And it's a good analogy, that, with what's happening with spaceflight at the moment as the technology has developed.
So private commercial money, as it were, is accelerating the whole space movement at the moment.
Yeah, totally. And it's been quite fantastic to see how it's gone. And I think Elon Musk has done us a great favour, because the Americans were trying to go back to the moon with the Artemis program, and they're still probably going to do their first test flight, uncrewed test flight, perhaps around about the 12th of April. And it was dragging and dragging and dragging. Elon Musk comes along, says the technologies have developed, here's some money, let's develop it. And within a very short space of time has started to build and get things done. They can cut through the red tape and waste less money than government agencies can actually do. We all know about governments getting involved in aerospace projects of all kinds, and it always overruns, always late, or never happens at all. And even Britain has a terrible experience with that. Whereas the private sector seems to be able to do that more efficiently and be able to filter the benefits from that, from a technological point of view, into the community much faster than the state has been able to do.
It's not just about Velcro, isn't it? Is it? There's the old legend that we have to thank the space programme for Velcro, amongst other things. But as you were saying,
which is
it's about
which is a myth. Velcro actually came out before the space programme.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Anti-lock brakes, though.
Anti-lock brakes.
Anti-lock brakes came from the shuttle programme, so they told me at NASA. Yeah.
There you go.
So there you go.
Yeah, and I must say, when you talk to any astronaut, as we so routinely do, they are so welcoming of this commercial money coming in, because they no longer have to keep defending the spending of public money on space. They can say, well, it's private business.
Absolutely.
So they're welcoming it. So things seem to be moving much faster than
they do. They do. Look, Andy Land, it's really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much
for having
indeed.
Me.
Now, let's have a bit of gossip, because there was a very big wedding yesterday. Meghan and Harry apparently were not reportedly invited to the wedding of Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz, but Prince William and Kate were.
Well, let's see what's going on with Sarah Robertson, Royal and Entertainment correspondent at the Sunday Mirror. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what is going on?
Well, this is my exclusive in today's paper. Yes, contrary to reports earlier this week that Meghan and Harry would be attending Brooklyn Beckham's wedding to Nicole Peltz, it actually wasn't true. They weren't invited. It was William and Kate who were. I can quote the sources saying, were first choice for Victoria and David to come to their son's wedding in Miami yesterday. They have a much closer relationship with William and Kate, which goes back years and years. There's a really long history between the two families to do with obviously sport, the football link between them both. And so that's where that relationship comes into play. So it was never about Meghan and Harry going to the wedding. It was always whether it was going to be Kate and William. But Kate and William did decline. It was due to obviously security issues, the amount of publicity that we've obviously seen that the weddings generated, and William, sent a note wishing them a great deal of joy and success.
So what do we know about the wedding? How did it go?
So the wedding seemed to go without a hitch. It went very well by all accounts. I imagine there's probably, they're 5 hours behind, so they're probably going to bed about now.
Yes, probably.
But it's been a long old party. Most of the Spice Girls were there. Mel C, Mel B. Jerry did miss it because she was in Australia with her husband, Christian Horner, at the Melbourne Grand Prix. But some of the other Spice Girls were there, and it's had like a sort of smattering of Hollywood stars, the likes of Eva Longoria, who is a long-term friend of Brooklyn's mother, Victoria. Oh. So it seems like it was the parents that had control of the guest list, shall we say, as opposed to Brooklyn and his now wife instead. But it looks like a very good wedding.
How did it compare? Because when David and Victoria got married, that was in OK magazine, wasn't it? It was largely seen as rather a vulgar do.
It was, wasn't it? We can't forget those iconic images of them on the throne, sat, and Victoria was in purple, wasn't she? And they had crowns.
I mean, honestly,
sort of
So how does this compare?
Royalty.
Have you been able to see any pictures? Have anything been leaked?
We haven't seen pictures. I mean, they're starting to come through now. We've seen some leaked pictures, sort of an outline of Nicole as she was going along the atrium in her dress, and Victoria sort of following behind her, and the dress by Valentino looks absolutely magnificent from what you can see, the outline.
Was it outdoors or indoors? Was it under one of those
pergolas? It was under one of
or...
these huge marquees, so it's obviously for the amount of guests.
It's a poor do if you have to get married in a tent.
The comparison is Victoria and David ended up on the front cover of OK. Brooklyn and his wife are getting the front cover of Vogue.
Gosh.
So
that says it all, actually, doesn't it?
He's beat his parents. So he's been elevated because her father's a billionaire. And
what's the goss on how they are as a couple? You know, he's 23, she's 27, something like that.
Yeah, so there is like a little bit of an age gap, and it sort of looks, when you look at their social media, Brooklyn is a smitten kitten, shall we say?
Well, so he should be on their wedding day.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, look, lovely. I'd say best of luck to him. Best of luck to him.
Yes.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you.
We're running out of time already, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
8 o'clock. So do stay with us, because we've got plenty more to come, including we'll be talking to a retired Scotland Yard detective about Dame Cressida Dick's legacy, and of course Boris in Kiev.
First off, here's the weather. And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK, and that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Boris Johnson promises Ukraine the military equipment it needs after holding surprise talks with President Zelensky in Kiev.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 10th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We are, of course, live across the whole of the UK on your TV and on your radio. And coming up this morning.
In his unannounced and surprise visit to Ukraine, the Prime Minister commits to sending 120 armoured vehicles as well as new anti-ship missile systems.
The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner on her final day in the job. We'll hear more from our Home and Security Editor in just a few minutes.
And 3 businessmen have paid $55 million each to become astronauts and stay for 1 week on the International Space Station. So we're wondering, if you had $55 million going spare, would you spend it on that or something else? Do let us know.
Yes, you can drop us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. What else can people message in about today?
What do you think of Boris? I mean, you're waking up maybe to the news that Boris Johnson visited Ukraine yesterday and actually walked through the streets of Kiev with President Zelensky. Quite something, isn't it? Are you impressed?
It is. Be brave like Boris is what the people of Kiev were saying to other European and world leaders.
So if you've been a former critic of Boris, and a lot of people have over the last few weeks, not been terribly impressed with everything he's said or done, has that changed your view of him? Certainly on the world stage, he has really stepped up.
He has. Let us know what you think. So the Prime Minister has pledged support for Ukraine after making a surprise visit to Kiev for talks with President Zelensky.
Downing Street have now confirmed what he said yesterday, which is that Britain will send 120 armoured vehicles and new anti-ship missile systems, promising Ukraine would get what it needs to stop another Russian attack.
What this war is certainly producing is a clarity about the vision of a future for Ukraine, where together with friends and partners, we, the UK and others, supply the equipment, the technology, the know-how, the intelligence, so that Ukraine will never be invaded again, so that Ukraine is so fortified and so protected that Ukraine can never be bullied again, never be blackmailed again, never be threatened in the same way again.
Well, let's head to Croatia. We can speak to NATO historian and journalist Professor Peter Caddick-Adams. Good to see you, as always, Peter. What do you make of this and what the Prime Minister was saying there? Because it seems to be, almost sort of offering NATO terms without being in NATO. We will make sure you are never threatened again.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing to say is that I'm sure this visit has come about through Boris personally overruling all his security advisors. They would have all said, no, don't go, that's far too dangerous, you're wandering into the middle of a war zone. And this is force of personality. There's a Prime Minister who has dual nationality, he has wide experience of the international world, far more than I think many other UK politicians, and has just stepped onto the world stage, as he was saying earlier. So that puts the United Kingdom up onto the world stage, really as the leader of the international effort of supplying arms to Ukraine. And he's done that, I think, on behalf of NATO, but on behalf of many other countries as well. Because what comes after in terms of security guarantees, and of course these failed in 1994 when the Western world were meant to be giving guarantees and assurances to Ukraine that nothing would happen if they gave up their nuclear weapons. They gave up nuclear weapons, and of course Russia marches in all those years later. So Boris is sort of front-loading while the rest of the world try and work out whether they can afford to provide guarantees in the future that might lead to another conflict with Russia. So that's part of what's going on.
But the way that Boris Johnson was talking there, he was saying, we pledge this so that you will never be attacked again. This attack isn't over, is it?
No, I mean, it's in full swing. And what's happened is the strategic picture has changed. So the big attacks on the cities, Kharkiv, Kiev, Mariupol and other places have largely died down, although Mariupol is still carrying on. And the attention is now focusing on the Donbass because there's a race for time. Victory Day is a big national celebration in Russia. It's a national holiday. And that's the day at which Putin needs to triumph a victory. And at the moment, he hasn't got one. So he's put a new general in charge, General Dvornikov, whose job is to unscramble the mess, throw everything he's got into a new campaign in Ukraine. And that'll be in the Donbass region, which is to the east of Kiev. So we've a bitter attritional slog ahead, and all eyes will be set on the 9th of May. And the weapons those Ukrainian troops need are different, and that's what we're rushing now to Ukraine: infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, more drones, and anti-ship missiles, because there's still a threat to Odessa. So that's what's going on. The picture has changed, therefore the weapons that we need to send to Ukraine have changed, and that's the reason for this timing of the Prime Minister's visit to Kiev at this particular moment.
I was going to say, in the meantime, I think it's in the Sunday Telegraph or the Sunday Times, one of the two, talking about the pressures now on NATO along the eastern flank, where actually moving forward, there is going to have to be a significant change, the papers claim, in terms of securing and policing the borders.
Well, that's exactly right, because on the Eastern Front, the Ukrainians have been defending their terrain ever since 2014. So they're the professional Ukrainian army, and they're seasoned because they've been at war for 8 years. They've got very good trench lines. But what's going to happen now as the Russians fall back from Kharkiv in the north and try and suppress Mariupol in the south is they'll be in a position to surround the Ukrainian forces. And so it's now no longer just sufficient for NATO to supply weapons and ammunition. They've got to be the right weapons, and they've got to be delivered immediately, because it's now a race against time, because the 9th of May is the date by which Putin needs his victory. And therefore, NATO can't afford to hang back, have its usual debates about do we or don't we, and do we escalate, and what weapon systems would be appropriate? Because it'll be too late if the Western powers hang on too much. And so Boris is leading the charge of saying, it's got to happen now. It's absolutely got to happen, and we need to send as much as possible, but not any old kit. It's got to be the right kind of missiles, the right kind of vehicles to meet this new threat. That's what's going on.
And could you just explain to everyone at the moment why the 9th of May is so important?
Okay, so our VE Day is the 8th of May. And for political reasons, Stalin didn't like the signing of that surrender document in 1945. And he had his own ceremony, which was a repeat of the German surrender to the Western Allies in Berlin, which took place on the 9th of May. So the Russians have their own VE Day, which they call Victory Day, which applies not just to the modern Russian Federation, but all the old Warsaw Pact and Soviet Union countries. And so that's still a sacred day. And that's where they measure and observe all the sort of lost lives in fighting Nazi Germany right up until 1945. And that's such an important day. Everything grinds to a halt. And the most important live outside broadcast of RT, for example, Russian state media, is the Victory Day ceremony in Red Square in Moscow. Last year, there were 12,000 troops on parade. Now, more than that have actually been killed, we reckon, in Ukraine to date. So, I mean, it'll be a huge thing. And everybody will know if there's a problem with the rumoured special military operation in Ukraine having gone wrong as far as the Russians are concerned.
Oh,
so I think
we've lost it there.
But message there.
There you go.
President Putin has to have a victory he can claim by the 9th of May.
Interesting, isn't it? Quite what that will mean.
It's a worry as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Peter Caddick-Adams there. Look, let's bring you up to date with the headlines at 10 minutes past 8. And President Zelensky has thanked the UK for its support, described Boris Johnson as one of the most principled opponents against Russia's invasion. Speaking at the joint press conference yesterday, President Zelensky called for further sanctions on all Russian banks and for an embargo on oil.
Pakistan's parliament has ousted Imran Khan as Prime Minister in a vote of no confidence. Speaking before the vote, he rejected calls for him to resign, accusing the West of a conspiracy to oust him over his recent visit to Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
A senior medic is warning that pressures on the NHS are increasing and patient safety is at risk as COVID infections surge. President for the Society of Acute Medicine, Dr. Tim Cooksley, said overcrowding in A&E is delaying ambulance transfers by up to 30 minutes.
And Scottish Labour has accused the SNP of gutting local communities after it emerged that libraries have lost out on more than £250,000 in the last decade. The party say cuts to local government funding means annual spending was 36% lower in 2020 than it was in 2010.
Now, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked the outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner on her final day in the job.
Yes, Dame Cressida Dick quit after Sadiq Khan criticised her handling of racist, misogynistic and homophobic messages that were shared by a group of officers who were based at Charing Cross Police Station.
Well, plus a series of other scandals which have plagued the Met during her time in the post. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, looks back now at her career.
As Scotland Yard's first female commissioner, Cressida Dick was always assured of her place in history. But the country's most senior policing role is never far from controversy. It is the most political of policing jobs, where issues managed are often of national significance. And straddling the demands of a Labour mayor and Conservative Home Secretary only add to the complexities. But for Cressida Dick, it was a series of scandals within her force that chipped away at her authority, ultimately leading London Mayor Sadiq Khan to withdraw his support.
But I'm not going to hide from the fact that I lost confidence in her. I'm not going to hide from the fact that we've had in our city a series of devastating scandals, overt racism, sexism, misogyny, discrimination, homophobia. We've had trust confidence from Londoners in the police service at rock bottom, and that's one of the reasons why I lost confidence in her, and it's one of the things I'll be looking for in a new commissioner, how they will address some of these serious issues that, frankly speaking, the current commissioner failed to address.
Much of the recent pressure on Cressida Dick followed the fallout from the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by one of the Met's own officers. As appalling as that was, it was compounded by the Met's handling of the subsequent vigil, which descended into scenes of violence. The murders of sisters Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman in a North London park brought further outrage after it was revealed two of the officers who should have been guarding the murder scene had taken selfies next to the sisters' bodies. The final straw came after the police watchdog published messages sent by officers based at a central London police station that used sexist, racist and homophobic language. With Sadiq Khan's refusal to back her, the Commissioner, who'd managed to ride out previous controversies, had no choice but to resign.
He has left me no choice but to step aside. I say this with deep sadness and regret. Undertaking this role, a Crown appointment, as a servant of the people of London and the United Kingdom, has been the greatest honour and privilege of my life.
Cressida Dick agreed to stay on while arrangements were made to find a successor, but today she finally leaves her post.
Right, on the floor, please, on the floor.
Among rank-and-file police officers, there was widespread support for a commissioner who, unlike some of her predecessors, was largely seen as having their backs. But ultimately, it was the behaviour of some of those officers who brought an end to the career of Scotland Yard's first female commissioner. Mark White, GB News.
Well, for more on this, retired Scotland Yard Detective Inspector and consultant Hamish Brown joins us now. A very good morning, Hamish. Thank you for joining us.
And to you, Anne, and certainly you, Stephen, as well.
It certainly was a case of that she didn't fall, she was pushed. We know that because she actually said it herself. She didn't want to retire. It was a political thing, really. She was caught up between two sides, wasn't she?
Yes, I've got to say that introduction was pretty fair, and I think quite today she was pushed. And I do think about the timing all this came about when the Mayor of London decided to get rid of her. And the story about the camel's back, of course, was the Charing Cross issue, which was 3 years ago, independently investigated. And it is that independent investigation from outside the police service that brought disciplinary charges where the officers couldn't be sacked. And there was hue and cry, they're still serving. But what I do take from the clip, the introduction, was that there were things chipping away at her, and eventually, I suppose she had to go. But it's absolutely right. She had the support of senior police officers and indeed rank and file. And I worked under a number of commissioners, the best without doubt was Sir John Stevens, Lord Stevens now. But each one has really faced a load of grief and aggravation. And indeed, since my retirement, and Cressida Dick, unfortunately, is going to be no exception. But do remember, 5 years ago, she was the best person for the job, and it was quite an assessment to find her. Now she's gone, and as your report fairly says, she agreed to stay on while success was found because there wasn't an obvious choice. Well, they've got to find someone. They've got to do it pretty quickly, you know, because the Metropolitan Police, as indeed all forces, need that stability.
What sort of person, Hamish, do the Met need at the top now? Because there's going to have to be, whatever you think of the sort of dismissive sort of claims against her, there is going to have to be some pretty significant reform, isn't there?
Well, the biggest reform is going to be the new commissioner, and I suppose the message they're going to put out about misconduct, that's going to be perhaps more for priority. One commissioner's lost their job, and the next commissioner won't want to go the same way. So maybe stricter disciplinary measures. But certainly they've got to be tough. They've got to have a sense of humour, that they've got to play that political game, and that's what I particularly object to. And Anne's first question, well, wasn't this a political decision? I wonder if it was precisely that. What I want to see is the police distancing themselves from the political arena and let them get on with their job. That is fighting crime. In the Metropolitan Police, protecting the people of London, they also have some national responsibilities. But there isn't a police officer out there who doesn't want to come into work and do a good job, and that's where they should be supported, and that's what the new commissioner should be aiming to do. Give them that support, moving on, but they've got to tidy up their act, yes.
It's always going to be political, though, isn't it? Because obviously she answers to the Home Secretary in some way, or certainly to the government. And in this case, the Mayor of London, on the other political side, she couldn't please everybody, could she?
No, and that is precisely the problem. You had a Labour and Conservative, very senior authorities there, and you can't please all the people all of the time. That's why the Commissioner must get on their job. Yes, of course, I understand they're under control of the Home Secretary, indeed the Mayor of London, but at the same time they're answerable to people of London, and somewhere there has to be that balance, the support for the officers, but the disgraceful behaviour, and I accept that, of some, a minority of officers, that can't be condoned, must be jumped upon. But bear in mind, there are 150,000 police officers in this country, 32,000 in London, in the Metropolitan Police area, and they don't come into work thinking about Sarah Everard and things like this. They come into work to get on with their shift. Thousands of officers will be doing an early shift this morning. They'll be walking into grief and aggravation, in some situations, horrible scenarios, in others, possibly to face danger. And they will get on with their job. And that's what they're about. I don't like the...
That's, Hamish, that's the problem, Hamish, isn't it, with all of this? That this has damaged, whatever you think of it, it's damaged the reputation of the police, and some would say it's damaged their confidence in the police. And yet, as you say, the vast majority of officers are good, hard-working, moralistic people doing an incredibly hard job.
Yes, that's right, and it's taken a terrible bashing, the reputation of the police service, particularly that of the Metropolitan Police. So that's where there's got to be a charm offensive, I think, in certain ways, to show that changes have been made. And hopefully a better press. I think the Charing Cross situation 3 years ago, and it came back to be the straw that broke the camel's back, I think that was a tragedy. But there were too many things before that properly highlighted in the opening report. So that's what the Commissioner will have to grapple with. Be interesting to see if it is a serving police officer. I do hope it is, not someone from military or indeed from industry. I'm not sure that will work at all. I think it's best to have a police officer there. It would give the staff, other police officers, far more confidence. But I suppose we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, as you say, they need to make that decision quickly, don't they? Thanks very much indeed for that. Yeah, they need to find somebody who can inspire confidence and boost morale and get a better press as well.
Get a better press. Hamish, thank you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
I have to say, I've always been a very big supporter of the police because, yeah, bad apples, yes, you get them. Yes, there are problems.
And they're the ones that make the headlines.
They make the headlines while the vast majority of people slog away. And it is hard and it is dangerous and it is not very well paid either.
And we need them. We need our police, don't we?
We do need the police. So if you're a boy or girl in blue this morning,
yeah,
you know, well done you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do stay with us, because we've got plenty more to come, including a look at Durham, which apparently could make history as the 2025 City of Culture.
And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK, and that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Morning.
8:26. Yes, good morning. It's so lovely to have you with us today, whether you're watching us on the TV or online or listening to us on the radio. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yes, and do let us know if you're watching from anywhere in the world, really. We were hearing earlier from somebody, I think, still in Australia. But anywhere in the world you're watching, we'd love to know where you are and what you think of any of the things we're talking about. Actually, Phil makes a very good point. Thanks, Phil. Do you think if Rishi Sunak had given us a good spring statement, nobody would be talking about his wife?
I think that's probably a fair point. Isn't that interesting, though?
It's a really good point.
Yeah. Irvin says, why do we use the word far right? Because we're talking about Marine Le Pen, and we say she's a far-right politician. It is all a bit subjective. We don't say far left when referring to someone like Jeremy Corbyn.
We do.
Well, I think we do. To be fair, I think
or we use
I think we
hard
do.
left, don't we?
Yes, as we do, hard left and
use
far
the word
right.
hard left and far right.
Yeah.
It means, where is your middle ground, I suppose?
Yes, centre ground is, that's what politicians, that's what I never understand with politics, is when you have these parties that go far right or far left, it's always the centre ground that wins.
Yeah, but then you even have centre left and centre right.
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah, it does
And
get a
that's
bit
all
confusing.
yes, very much so.
I love this. We're talking about money, and if you want a load of money, because it's costing $55 million to go up to the International Space Station per ticket.
And I was just wondering whether there isn't a better way to spend that money.
Yeah.
If you've got that sort of money, shouldn't you be spending it a little more altruistically, given the state of the world at the moment?
Well, let's head to Kent. And Tia Maria, I don't know where your money would go, Tia Maria. She says, or he says, I'd spend the money buying holiday homes in the south of France, the Hamptons and Antigua.
Well, I don't blame you.
No.
But where's the altruism in that?
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to be altruistic if you don't want to.
If you've got an awful lot of money, you don't need all of that money yourself, do you?
It's like when, what's he called, the money-saving expert, Martin Lewis. I should know his name because I used to work with him years ago. Yes, I did.
He's in the papers today.
Oh, well,
I've
yeah.
seen him somewhere.
But when he got that, when he sold his website, he sold it for, this could be wrong, but it was something like £150 million or something along those lines. And he gave, I think it was more than half of it, he immediately gave away to sort of charities.
He does that continually now, too.
Yeah, and
gives an awful lot to charity.
I just remember at the time thinking, crackers.
No!
Crackers.
And I know there are an awful lot of very rich, famous people who do that very, very quietly. They are altruistic. They regularly give money to, I suppose, their favourite charities, which is fair enough. But they do try and do good with it as well as keeping it. You just don't hear about it, I guess. But I still wonder if you've got £55 million in your pocket, dollars, actually, $55 million, would you spend it going up into space, or would you think of something a little bit more worthwhile to do with it? Stephen says, I'd buy my parents a new bungalow, wherever they want to live, and then give a big portion to charity.
Phil says, Phil, I'm with you. If I won $55 million, I'd just enjoy counting it all. I'm a baby boomer.
No!
Oh, I would, yeah.
I'd count some of it.
Be like Scrooge McDuck. Remember that? Diving into the coins.
Yeah.
Oh.
Gavin says, I think those astronauts are selfish. They could build houses for the poor with all that money. By the way, love the show.
I don't know. If it was you, though, Gavin, would you do the same thing? You know, would you give it all away or give a large proportion of it away? I think it's easy for us to be critical of people when it's not our money. Oh, that stumped you.
Yeah, no, I know. And I guess I'm not being critical. I'm just asking if you've got that much money, if it's pocket money to you, and it clearly is to those very, very wealthy businessmen who are up in the ISS right now. And I know they're doing good. And we heard earlier that the sheer fact that they're spending their money rather than government money on going up into space is sort of, increasing the space race. It means that more things are being done, more science is being discovered, and they are doing some really worthwhile science up there. Maybe I should just shut up, I don't know.
No,
I was asking what you thought about Boris as well.
Oh, I should just say, before we move on, because someone's tweeted me, she's not the best way to get hold of us, is tweeting us directly, because I don't look at it very often. Martin Pendleton, morning Martin, says it might be that each of those billionaires in space have already given $55 million to charities. We shouldn't consider them selfish without knowing the facts.
No, I think that's very true too.
That point.
Asking about Boris in Ukraine, and I'm saying, no matter what you've ever thought of Boris in the last few weeks, and he has come in for a lot of criticism, Partygate and all that sort of thing, do you think he's actually increased in your estimation since in Kiev yesterday, when he actually sort of paid this surprise visit to President Zelensky? Has he stepped up on the world stage and therefore stepped up in your opinion? Wendy says, this man would do anything to distract from his hypocrisy and lies. I've lost any bit of faith in the government. I might vote Raving Loony Party next time.
I think, Wendy, that's too harsh. I do, because I understand what you're saying, but it's how important this has been to President Zelensky, as he's pointed out, and the people that he met over there, and as the word gets about, it is symbolism. It is symbolism, but
terribly important to the Ukrainians.
Symbolism makes a big difference at times. So I would say, Wendy, you've been a little bit harsh there. But you are, of course, entitled to your view. All views are welcome.
Yes, please tell us what your views are. That's GBViews at gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GBnews.
Now, a woman from Scotland who's sponsoring a family of Ukrainian refugees says not enough is being done to help them arrive in the country.
Yeah, Ailsa McKay is offering accommodation for 2 sisters and a teenage girl at her home in West Lothian. Our Scotland reporter, David Donaldson, spoke with her about the journey the family made to get to Scotland.
So my family have had a really difficult journey through 5 or 6 different European countries. They've been travelling more or less non-stop for about 3 weeks. Our visa applications were submitted on the 18th of March when the scheme opened, and we are still waiting to hear back on those.
It's been some journey for them, I understand, as well, through numerous countries.
Yeah, so I've been in touch with the family since they left Kyiv. I think this was about the 16th or 17th of March. They ended up in Romania and then in Bucharest. From there, they travelled to Budapest and Hungary. Because of the volume of people on the move, there's, I think the volunteers are doing their best, but there's a real incentive to keep people moving on. So from Budapest, they were put on a train to Munich in Germany. And they were only able to spend a night or two there before they were put on a train to Bologna in Italy. And they actually spent about a week or so in Pesaro in northern Italy before flying to Ireland on Saturday morning. And they're now currently somewhere northwest of Sligo in some disused council building, being housed with another Ukrainian family at the moment, but they have no heating at all, and they're currently sharing a single bed. So it's obviously not an ideal long-term situation for them to be in.
You've obviously been in touch with the family all along the way. What's been the sort of conversations you've had with them? Difficult,
because they're scared, they're running out of money. It's very difficult to feel that you're constantly being moved on. So at the back of their minds, they're always thinking, I've got another day here, will the visa come through? Because then I have to move again. So that's been more or less the gist of the conversations. Are you okay? Have you got somewhere to stay? Have you been fed? Do you know what you're doing tomorrow? It's been really basic. I mean, we've had quite a few conversations, but very much around the logistics of what's happening and timescales and what's happening next.
Do you think enough has been done to try and get these people over here and into homes, or do you think it's a process that needs to be speeded up somewhat?
Undoubtedly, it needs to be speeded up. There needs to be more transparency and feedback as to where applications are. I mean, I've spent more than 8 hours on hold to UKVI trying to get information, and when you do get through to someone, they can't tell you anything. They can't see the applications, they can't tell you where they are in the system, they can't give you any idea of timescales, they can't tell you where everything is okay. So you're just guessing, second guessing what's happening next. The forms themselves, I mean, I believe they've been simplified, but they're extremely difficult to fill out for a family who are on the move, on a mobile phone, on a data package, on a train. Personally, I feel that that the entire process is designed to be as obstructive and difficult as possible. I do appreciate that security checks need to be undertaken. I don't see why. I don't understand why we're the only European country where people can't enter the country first and then we undertake these checks. It's just inhumane.
And there you are. It seems that, I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks now.
Weeks and weeks.
How long it's taking to get through all of the red tape. Nothing seems to have been speeded up.
No, it doesn't really, does it? But then again, how many people are actually wanting to come here?
Well, we don't know, and we should know, shouldn't we?
We don't know, but every time I know some people do, but a lot of people we've spoken to when we had people out on the ground saying, no, we don't want to go. We don't want to move that far away.
But there's a village up quite near me in Oxfordshire, which nearly everybody in the village has opened their home to a Ukrainian refugee. But they're saying exactly the same thing as that lady, Elsa, saying that it just seems like all of the forms they have to fill in, all of the hurdles they have to go over, is just putting unnecessary blocks up. Or at least that's what it feels like.
Got to do the security checks, though, haven't we?
Yes, of course we have. Yeah.
I mean, there's no easy answer to that. You can't just let anyone just come in.
Poland didn't they? They did. Poland just opened their arms.
Yeah, well, yes.
We're a bit different.
Well, yeah. Let us know what you think about that one. Now, here's something. If you live in one of these beautiful parts of the world, 4 areas have been shortlisted to become the UK's City of Culture 2025.
Yes, apparently it's Southampton, Bradford, County Durham and Wrexham County, all in the running.
Yes, well, Dr. Sarah Glynn is Interim Strategic Manager for Culture at Durham County Council, and she tells us about the bid.
We've got a lot of beauty. We're industrial, we're wild, we're urban. And what that means is that we can do loads of things that the cities maybe can't do. But it also gives us a chance to show that kind of dichotomy between the different places in County Durham. So, people know Durham Cathedral as a Harry Potter set, and actually move a little bit out of it, then you're sort of in a Ken Loach film. And it's an opportunity for us to kind of supercharge and bring those communities together and really put Durham on the map nationally and internationally.
I know Durham Cathedral, the sort of internal pillars in Durham Cathedral are remarkable. There's something architecturally unique about them.
But you don't know what?
I can't remember quite. It's because they've got like spirals around them or something, if I remember correctly. But I didn't know it was in a Harry Potter film.
Oh yes, and it does look beautiful, doesn't it? It's sort of Hogwarty. Anyway, do stay with us. It's a new word. Stay with us because we're going to be taking a look through the papers after this.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
It is 8:40, whether you're listening on the radio or watching on the TV. This is Breakfast with Miss Anne Diamond and Dr. Stephen Dixon.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you are? You're an honorary, aren't you?
I've got 2.
Wow, I'm terribly impressed. That's quite something,
yes.
isn't it?
Yes, looks
I'm
very...
still waiting to be a baroness, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Dropping a hint in case anyone's watching.
It'll happen.
Yeah. Shall we take a look at the front pages today? Welcome to Kiev, my friend. The story on the Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine. That leads the Sunday Express.
While there, Boris Johnson pledged new arms, including military vehicles and missiles. The Observer also focuses on this surprise visit.
A full-scale NATO military force will be permanently deployed to defend the borders of Europe. That's according to plans revealed by the chief of the alliance. The Telegraph says a sufficient presence is required to repel a Russian invasion.
Mail on Sunday says Rishi's on the brink, as friends say he could quit to spare his family being dragged through the papers.
And there you are. The Chancellor's wife has escaped 11 Downing Street, with the Times describing it as a goldfish bowl.
They live in number 10, though, don't they?
Yes, they do, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. The press always say they're living above the shop. But it's quite a posh shop.
I would, if I was Prime Minister, I would move back to number 10, symbolically.
I don't think there's enough room for a growing family.
Oh, well, I haven't got one.
No, but he has.
Let's go through the papers now in a bit more detail with the journalists Nabila Ramdani and Benedict Spence. It's good to see you both this morning. Benedict, we looked at this yesterday. It's going to get worse next weekend, of course. Travel anarchy
Yep. This is, again, I mean, you're going to hear this ongoing for the next couple of years, I would imagine, a knock-on effect of the pandemic. But this is due to the jobs shortfall in the travel sector. And, we've all seen the scenes, haven't we, of queues at Manchester Airport, etc. The World Travel and Tourism Council says that globally there's a 220,000 job shortfall across the world. And this is how I'm afraid you're going to see it manifesting. Obviously, you've got the queues at places like Dover, you've got issues at passport control, and it's because everywhere, basically, people that were laid off during the pandemic as the travel industry sort of atrophied, the end of furlough, for example, it became very expensive to keep people on when there just wasn't the industry to support it. Now everything's come roaring back. International travel, holidays, of course, we've got Easter coming up, and then obviously later on we've got the summer coming up, and restrictions are being relaxed, so people have got far more choice. And what you get chaos, because there just isn't the infrastructure, the system to support the usual amount of people wanting to travel.
There must be people who lost their jobs who could come back to them.
One would think.
If they were being recruited properly.
One would think, but I suspect that's partly what the issue is. I mean, of course, one of the things that we don't think about, of course, is that international travel requires an awful lot of checks and safeguards and things. You might have had a lot of older people deciding, do you know what, I'm going to take early retirement or whatever it is, that this isn't for me anymore. But of course, if you want to work for an airline or something, you need all sorts of background checks, all sorts of training. Whatever aspect of the job that it is, you want to be cabin crew, you want to be baggage handler, you want to work in air traffic control, doesn't matter. It's a very sort of labour-intensive job. A lot of security protocols go into it. And, apparently we're going to see this at least for the next year.
We need to get, I'll tell you what we need, in terms of cabin crew, older cabin crew. I understand why they tend to be young, because there are a lot of safety features, but if you fly American Airlines, which I haven't done for a long time, but they don't employ cabin crew under the age of 50. Or they didn't. Yes, they're always older cabin crew in American Airlines.
I've always tended to find that the older cabin crew certainly have a much better sense of humour, because they've sort of seen it all before. They have a lot more patience.
Isn't it unfortunate, though, to see such stories after months and months of lockdown and travel restrictions, and now we're finally opening up. We're getting rid of, travel forms. We're getting rid of masks gradually, and PCR tests, and people are more free to travel, and yet we're running out of staff. You couldn't make it up. I mean,
it's incredible the thirst for travel suddenly.
And you can't blame people who have been cooped up for such a long time. And I think it's absolutely right that we should be looking to get away on holiday at any cost. But
maybe it was staggering our holiday times. I know that's not always easy if you've got young children, but perhaps schools should be a little bit more. Children have lost such a lot of school time. To lose a week just so your parents can go on holiday in the off-season would be better, wouldn't it? I don't know. I don't.
A sensible society might plan ahead with the sorts of things.
And diamonds being controversial.
It's Easter weekend, let's all go on holiday.
Yeah.
Stagger your holiday times.
It's a problem. It's a problem. Nabila, in the Sunday Times, looking at uniforms, school uniform advice.
Yes, indeed. This is a story about how basically head teachers are to be told what uniform transgender pupils should wear and whether they can join in single-sex school sports team as well.
Why do they have to be told that? Isn't it pretty obvious?
Well, this comes a week after, effectively, the government has issued guidelines for in relation to transgender people and whether or not they can be included in services. Well, they've basically advocated that single-sex services could exclude transgender people if it was justifiable and indeed appropriate. And now the controversy or the discussion continues, and it's brought to schools.
What sort of uniform are they saying is suitable? Or are they not? They're not actually saying yet.
Actually saying whether they should be wearing skirts or trousers or.
I just wonder how many in your average school. How many pupils are going to have this concern? And it can't be that many. And then surely it's a sensible approach.
I bet it's more than you think.
Well, this is the thing. From my understanding, I have friends and I have relatives who work in schools. It is more than you'd think, but it is a sudden uptick. And the problem is, of course, it's not necessarily people who are going to be transgender their whole lives. It's as much as anything, you do get transgender individuals, but you also get an element of mimesis about this as well, which is that children can be very impressionable and things are fashionable, or they are very confused about who they are, what they are. It's not necessarily a permanent change in their life. It's just a direction that they've swung in for the time being. And this is important to recognise that those people exist as well as transgender people.
Well, maybe it should be time to say, uniform freedom. You should just be able to, if you want to wear, if you're a girl and you want to wear trousers and a blazer or whatever, do it. If you're a boy and want to wear a skirt, why not? It's only like a kilt at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I've never worn
This has always been my view, is that we should have more kilts in society.
Absolutely, it would solve a lot of problems. That's probably not the hugest problem, the uniform itself. It's the whether or not they could join the girls' netball team or the boys'
Yes,
football team.
I think that's the key concern underpinning this, not just for children or teachers, but for a lot of parents as well. You know, we do get this, don't we? You know, the sporting aspect of it in the media writ large, but of course it has an effect on the grassroots, on the individuals at a very young and important stage of their development. And you know, these are legitimate concerns, I think, that a lot of parents have.
Love to hear from you if you're a head teacher or a teacher and you've had to deal with this sort of problem.
Yeah, interesting stuff,
How do you do it?
isn't it?
Or is it just something that, you know, a bit of common sense and sensitivity would actually...
I would have thought.
I would have thought so.
Look, we are sadly out of time. It's been a busy old morning this morning, but Nabila and Benedict, thank you both very much indeed. It's been great to see you today.
Yeah. So let's bring you up to date with today's headlines. And President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the UK for its support and described Boris Johnson as one of the most principled opponents against Russia's invasion. Speaking at a joint press conference, President Zelensky called for further sanctions on all Russian banks and for an embargo on oil.
Pakistan's parliament has ousted Imran Khan as Prime Minister in a vote of no confidence. Speaking before that vote, Mr Khan rejected calls for him to resign, accusing the West of a conspiracy to oust him over his recent visit to Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
A senior medic is warning that pressures on the NHS are increasing and patient safety is at risk as COVID infections surge. President of the Society for Acute Medicine, Dr. Tim Cooksley, has said overcrowding in A&E is delaying ambulance transfers by up to 30 minutes.
And against the odds at 50 to 1, Noble Yeats won this year's Grand National at Aintree, ridden by amateur Sam Whaley-Cohen on his last ever ride. The 7-year-old horse beat 15-2 favourite Any Second Now by 2.25 lengths. Delta Work was third.
Well, world politics is all up there and people are juggling like that sort of thing. There's an awful lot of showbiz news as well at the moment, as you'd expect. Busy weekend for Stephanie.
It has been a busy weekend, actually. I thought things would be slowing down, but it's been quite hectic. We've had weddings, we've had engagements, and tonight we've got the Olivier Awards, which I'll delve into in a bit.
Oh, right.
But obviously the big thing everyone's been talking about this weekend is Brooklyn Beckham's wedding to Nicola Peltz. So it was a star-studded affair, as to be expected. It took place last night. In total, they spent £3 million on this wedding, which, how much are you spending, Steve? Is that...
yeah, oddly enough. Anything like that.
But yeah, it was a star-studded affair. It had Eva Longoria was there, Serena Williams was there, Gordon Ramsay was there.
They're all older celebrity type people. It's not like they're Brooklyn's
No,
friends.
they're not. It's all the parents' friends and stuff like that.
I suppose that's what family weddings are about.
Yeah, but guys, we're not actually going to know that... when you've got friends like that. It was actually Brooklyn paid homage to Nicola's Jewish roots, and apparently they got married under a floral garland upper.
Yeah, no, I'm sure
and
it was
stuff.
lovely.
Yeah, but actually, guys, we're not going to be seeing any of the pictures because, as in any celebrity wedding, they've got a magazine deal with Vogue.
All right.
So all the pictures will be coming out in the next edition
Which is
of Vogue.
quite interesting, isn't it? Because when David Beckham and Victoria got married, they sold the pictures to
OK magazine, yes.
And generally it was seen as sort of almost tacky.
Yeah, I did.
Wealthy tacky.
You know, at the time, OK, obviously fits the brand, fitted the Team Beckham brands, but I'm sure if David Beckham and Victoria were getting married today, they would not go for OK. They would definitely go for Vogue and stuff like that. But yeah,
Do we know anything about the bride's dress then?
Well,
if
apparently...
it's going to be on Vogue, I mean, it's got to be brilliant.
Yes, so apparently she's gone for Valentino, actually. So she had 3 dresses, but the main dress of the day was Valentino. Yes. 3.
No wonder it cost £3 million quid.
Yep. She had 3 days worth of events. So they had Friday, yesterday, and I think maybe something might after effect. But the main dress was designed by Valentino. So she was going back and forth to Italy, getting tried on and stuff like that. So.
Blimey. Harry, honestly,
How
isn't
the
it, to
rich
do?
and famous live for their weddings.
So, young Brooklyn Beckham, who we all remember being born, is now a married man.
He is a married man. And long may this marriage last.
Oh, yeah, you've got to wish him every success with it all.
Everyone was saying that either Meghan or Harry might be turning up, but apparently, as the lovely Sarah Robertson told me on the break, she was like, apparently it was actually Will and Kate who was invited to the wedding and not Harry and Meghan, which is a bit weird.
All right. Let's have a look at the Olivier Awards. Back tonight.
Yes, after 3 years, it's been away. So it's back with some eco-credentials today. So it's going to have a green carpet. And it's going to be taking place at the Royal Albert Hall tonight. And we've got big names such as Lily Allen, we've got Eddie Redmayne, Jessie Buckley. They're some of the big names that will be up for awards tonight. It's going to be on ITV tonight at 10:15. And it's going to be quite a theatrical performance. There'll be a few musicals,
Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Stephanie. We'll catch up with you in the next hour. I went to the Olivier Awards once.
Really? Yeah.
With Emma Crosby, who I used to work with, and it was a very nice do. And I bumped into, was it that night I bumped into Russell T Davies? I think it was.
Oh, that you must have enjoyed
fan.
that Doctor Who man.
I love that very much.
Plenty to talk about, I'm sure.
Yes. Now, we're going to talk to a remarkable woman who's campaigning for a life-extending treatment to be approved in the UK.
Yes, Nancy Carter-Bradley has stage 3 brain cancer and has raised over £10,000 for charity. And I'm glad to say she joins us now. Hello there.
Good to see you this morning, because I've been watching you on Twitter and Instagram and things. And actually, it was someone who follows you, and I don't think it's someone you know, who sent me a clip of your video and said, when you were saying you want to get more publicity, and said, you should get this woman on the show.
Oh, well, that's great.
And so it's down to one of your followers. It's power of social media.
That's really
Isn't it, really? But what you obviously are in, you've got they describe it as terminal brain tumours now, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you are being quite so upfront and vocal and
campaigning.
It seems positive in a way.
Well, I'm not going to die quietly.
Good.
I have to do something. Brain cancer treatment hasn't really moved on since I was first diagnosed in 2005. And
I'm staggered to hear that, actually.
It's a really underfunded cancer, but it's actually the largest cancer killer in 40s and unders.
Is it really?
It really is, yeah. But there haven't really been many developments. Until fairly recently, some things have changed, and I've fallen out of remission again, and now I'm inoperable. And this new treatment could really make a difference.
What is it?
So it's basically tumour treating fields. In America, it's considered the fourth pillar of cancer treatment. You've got chemotherapy, radiotherapy, immunotherapy, and this. Over here, we haven't really got it available for the population in this country.
I mean, they're saying it's too expensive, aren't they, partly?
It is, but I believe there's a deal to be made. I do. The last review was 2018. Times have moved on. We've had a whole pandemic. There's a lot more data, and I think it needs to be reviewed again.
Who's listening to you? Is anyone listening to you?
No.
This is why you're speaking out.
Yeah, I have to. My friends are dying. I'm not far behind them. I'm in a position where my tumour's on my occipital lobe, so it's my eyesight, my balance that's affected. So I'm still able to come out and talk about it. A lot of my friends can't, and I think something needs to be done about this, really. So that's why I'm here.
One of the things you're doing is you've got a book.
Yes. So
raising money.
Absolutely. I'm an ambassador for the Brain Tumour Charity. I brought you a copy of my book each.
Oh, lovely. Oh, you've got a copy of it there. Lovely.
Oh, good.
And so far, along with some Instagram fundraising, I've raised £10,000 for the Brain Tumour Charity.
Yeah, that's good.
And my daughter and I wrote it, she illustrated it, she's a medical student. And in the first lockdown, we worked together because I thought, right, time is of the essence, and I need to do some bucket list items, and writing a book was...
I mean, there are a lot of people watching right now. What can we all do to support you?
Well, what I really need is signatures to get this petition debated into Parliament.
Yeah, what are you on about? 25,000 so far?
26,500, I think, give or take. Yeah.
So you need it up to 100,000.
I do. Yeah, the government response at 10,000 wasn't really very effective. I'm being quoted outdated information. So we need a new conversation. We need to push, raise awareness, and we need to have a fresh set of eyes reviewing it and to get this available on the NHS.
It's interesting that your daughter's a medical student. She must talk about this with her fellow students, as it were. What do they think?
Well, I think everyone's frustrated because when I worked with the BBC, I basically came across hundreds, thousands of patients who in this country have a life expectancy of about 3 months to 2 years. And there are hundreds of people who 5 years on with the worst type of tumour who are living a great life, good quality of life. And it's astonishing. And so as a would-be doctor, she's obviously upset to see me in a difficult position, but frustrated.
Yeah.
Can I just say, obviously one thing, whatever happens, is the power of family in all of this. I love the fact you go by Avocado Fairy. Yes. And I was noticing that you've got Lord Avocado, your husband, you've got Dr. Avocado, your daughter, you've got Army Avocado, your son.
That's right.
And it seems like you are a close and lovely family.
Well, they're the only reason why I've still got a little bit of sanity left. They really support me. It's really hard. I'm back on chemo and I'm back another cycle tomorrow, and they help me all the time. They really do.
Well, we all know that avocados are good for you.
They are.
Power, fruit, or I think they are a fruit, aren't they? You're a great bunch of avocados.
Yeah.
Let's hope you make a difference.
Yeah, well, keep up the good fight. Thank you for coming in. You've done better than you were predicting you would do on Instagram last night, or you just thought you'd blurble.
Oh, no, you saw that too.
Yes, I
did. Yeah, well, I hope some words have come out in the right order.
I think, as you say, it's about getting the signatures, raising money, but getting that awareness
message out there.
is really important.
You've just done that. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, Nancy, thank you.
Right, we're zooming towards 9 o'clock. In a few moments, the very latest on Boris Johnson in Kiev.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Boris Johnson promises Ukraine the military equipment it needs after holding surprise talks with President Zelensky in Kiev.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes past 9, Sunday the 10th of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We are, of course, live right across the whole of the UK on your TV and radio and globally online.
Coming up this morning, in his unannounced visit to Ukraine, the Prime Minister commits to sending 120 armoured vehicles as well as new anti-ship missile systems.
The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick on her final day in the job. We'll hear from our Home and Security Editor about her time in the job.
And 3 businessmen have paid $55 million each to become astronauts and stay for 1 week on the International Space Station. So we're asking, have you had $55 million going spare? Would you spend it on this, or what would you spend it on? Do let us know by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweeting us @gbnews.
Now, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Irina Vereshchuk, says Kiev has agreed 9 humanitarian corridors to help people escape heavy fighting in the east of the country.
And yesterday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged support for Ukraine by sending more military hardware after making a surprised visit to Kiev for talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky.
What this war is certainly producing is a clarity about the vision of a future for Ukraine, where together with friends and partners, we, the UK and others, supply the equipment, the technology, the know-how, the intelligence, so that Ukraine will never be invaded again, so that Ukraine is so fortified and so protected that Ukraine can never be bullied again, never be blackmailed again, never be threatened in the same way again.
Well, that speech went down very well, both locally and back here, actually. For more on this, former Army officer and military expert Patrick Benham-Crosswell joins us now. Very good morning, Patrick. Thanks for joining us. It looks as though the situation in Ukraine has changed. Kiev now safe enough for our Prime Minister to visit.
Well, yes. I mean, we've been seeing this for some time, and the Russians have been withdrawing to presumably to regroup and do something in the east, which clearly makes the Kiev safe. I mean, it's what leaders do, is go to the front to see for themselves as soon as they can, and I think important in this case to be seen. Part of the Ukrainians' key defence is to hang on to the hope that they can win this thing, and if Western leaders are going there as well as sending weaponry and intelligence and other stuff, then that can only help the Ukrainians and therefore make the Russians' future more difficult.
I mean, where are we in terms of? I mean, we're sort of 6 weeks in now for what was meant to be a 4 or 5 day operation from Moscow. 6 weeks in, and this is going to go on for some time yet. We are going to see, presumably from Russia, aren't we, a significant change in strategy moving forward now?
Indeed. I mean, there are indications that they've done obvious things that perhaps they should have done in January, like unify their chains of command. And what they're trying to do now is rebuild an army that, if not shattered, is not in particularly good shape. Come up with a plan that will work, and then at a time of their choosing, either fight to recover or to invade the Donbass and the Donetsk, or possibly fight to destroy the Ukrainian army and then be able to occupy what they like. Now, neither of those two things are going to be easy, but I think it's important to remember that in this one little bit, Russia gets to decide where it attacks, and that creates the problem for the Ukrainians of, one, stopping the Russians continuing anymore. I mean, every time I've been on the show, we've been talking about how long people have been lasting in Mariupol, and the forecast is always that they will last for another 2 or 3 days, and that's been 40 days now. The second Ukrainian problem is to prepare for the Russian onslaught wherever it happens. And the third one, of course, is to get their combat troops some rest and some recovery so that they're fresh and good to go when the next Russian assault unleashes itself.
What do you read into the sort of military hardware and help that Boris Johnson pledged yesterday? I mean, it even included anti-ship missiles. Does that suggest a completely different strategy for fighting in those or defending those eastern regions?
No, if you remember, there has been bits of naval infantry floating around the Black Sea threatening to attack Odessa, and I would imagine that the anti-ship missiles will make that a less straightforward operation if the Russians want to go that way. The other stuff we sent, primarily the massive protected mobility vehicles, they're very well armoured. They won't survive a hit from a tank, but they can get very close to the front. And of course, the Ukrainians' problem, and it's a quality problem, is they've got a very large number of people of military age, most of whom have training, but they don't necessarily have the kit to move them safely around the place. And when the Russians strike, and only then, will the Ukrainians know where they're fighting. So having protected mobility for newly arrived troops or newly recovered troops is actually quite crucial to them.
I mean, presumably it is key now to maintain the momentum, partly why Boris has done what he's done and providing that military equipment, and hopefully others will do the same. But it is about keeping that momentum going now, to keep pushing back.
Yes. The Ukrainian balance is between recapturing territory, which of course consumes a lot of effort, and the Russians have the defending advantage, and preparing for the next one. So I doubt we'll see full-scale recovery of all Ukrainian territory. What we're more likely to see is more of the same, which is limited counterattacks to recover key terrain and prevent the Russians perhaps being able to wrest initiative or settle into a comfortable stalemate.
OK, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks very much for bringing us up to date. That's former Army officer and military expert Patrick Benham-Crosswell. Thank you.
It's fascinating to get that insight, as all the experts that we talk to get that sort of military insight into...
They can read the strategies, can't they?
Yes, it's very, very clever stuff. But it raises questions again about what strategy did Putin actually think he had?
And does he recognise himself the fact that it must have failed, his first strategy?
But whether it'd be interesting to know how much of that came from him, leading from the very top, or how much was coming from those generals around him.
Yes.
Whether we'll ever find out, of course, is impossible to say.
Well, let's bring you up to date with the news headlines that you need to know this Sunday morning. President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the UK for its support, described Boris Johnson as one of the most principled opponents against Russia's invasion. Speaking at the joint press conference, President Zelensky called for further sanctions on all Russian banks and for an embargo on oil.
Pakistan's parliament has ousted Imran Khan as Prime Minister in a vote of no confidence. Speaking before that vote, Mr Khan rejected calls for him to resign, accusing the West of a conspiracy to oust him over his recent visit to Moscow.
A senior medic here in the UK is warning that pressures on the NHS are increasing and patient safety is at risk as COVID infections surge. President of the Society for Acute Medicine, Dr Tim Cooksley, has said overcrowding in A&E is delaying ambulance transfers by up to 30 minutes.
The Scottish Labour Party has accused the SNP of gutting local communities after it emerged that libraries have lost out on more than £250,000 in the last decade. The party says cuts to local government funding means annual spending was 36% lower in 2020 than it was in 2010. Now, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has thanked the outgoing Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Cressida Dick, on her final day in the job.
Yeah, she quit, of course, though, after Sadiq Khan criticised her handling of the racist, misogynistic and homophobic messages that were shared by a group of officers based at Charing Cross Police Station.
Well, plus, of course, there's been a series of other scandals, including the horrific murder of Sarah Everard, which have really plagued the Met during her time in the post. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, looks back now at her career.
As Scotland Yard's first female commissioner, Cressida Dick was always assured of her place in history. But the country's most senior policing role is never far from controversy. It is the most political of policing jobs, where issues managed are often of national significance. And straddling the demands of a Labour mayor and Conservative Home Secretary only add to the complexities. But for Cressida Dick, it was a series of scandals within her force that chipped away at her authority, ultimately leading London Mayor Sadiq Khan to withdraw his support.
But I'm not going to hide from the fact that I lost confidence in her. I'm not going to hide from the fact that we've had in our city a series of devastating scandals, overt racism, sexism, misogyny, discrimination, homophobia. We've had trust confidence from Londoners in the police service at rock bottom, and that's one of the reasons why I lost confidence in her, and it's one of the things I'll be looking for in a new commissioner, how they will address some of these serious issues that, frankly speaking, the current commissioner failed to address.
Much of the recent pressure on Cressida Dick followed the fallout from the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by one of the Met's own officers. As appalling as that was, it was compounded by the Met's handling of the subsequent vigil, which descended into scenes of violence.
Move back!
The murders of sisters Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman in a North London park brought further outrage after it was revealed two of the officers who should have been guarding the murder scene had taken selfies next to the sisters' bodies. The final straw came after the police watchdog published messages sent by officers based at a central London police station that used sexist, racist and homophobic language. With Sadiq Khan's refusal to back her, the Commissioner, who'd managed to ride out previous controversies, had no choice but to resign.
He has left me no choice but to step aside. I say this with deep sadness and regret. Undertaking this role, a Crown appointment, as a servant of the people of London and the United Kingdom, has been the greatest honour and privilege of my life.
Cressida Dick agreed to stay on while arrangements were made to find a successor, but today she finally leaves her post.
Right, on the floor, please, on the floor.
Among rank-and-file police officers, there was widespread support for a commissioner who, unlike some of her predecessors, was largely seen as having their backs. But ultimately, it was the behaviour of some of those officers who brought an end to the career of Scotland Yard's first female commissioner. Mark White, GB News.
Well, joining us now is solicitor and human rights activist Rashda Hamid. Good morning, Rashda.
Good morning. How are you, Anne and Stephen?
It's lovely to be with you. Thank you very much. What do you read into Dame Cressida Dick's resignation? We know that she was reluctant to go. She did in the end concede that she had to. How do you read it?
Well, for me, the fact that she said Sadiq Khan is politicising policing, for me, from the beginning, I mean, I feel like she hasn't really taken ownership of what the Met are doing. She hasn't been accountable. She hasn't been transparent. She's been protecting the Met as if it was, her little organisation that she has to protect from the world, whereas they have been heavily criticised, the Met Police have. And I believe any officer in her ranking or in her position should, because they are an officer of the public, they should be more accountable, more transparent, and take on the views of the local residents. So that for me is, for her resignation, I mean, she's took it with, she hasn't took it sort of gracefully. She sort of said that Sadiq Khan has basically pushed her out to resign. But I feel there were obviously a lot of problems in her leadership, which is why Sadiq Khan did call her out for the racism, misogyny, sexism, Islamophobia and everything else under her leadership.
Well, it does seem extraordinary, doesn't it, that, a historic figure as the first female leader of the Metropolitan Police, and yet it is sexism, misogyny, and indeed female safety in the capital, which has ultimately been her downfall. It does seem very strange that hasn't been something which has been you know, maybe not top of her agenda, but certainly high up as a female leader.
Absolutely. And I think with fair dues to her, I mean, the pandemic has made domestic violence rates soar through the roof. And then the recruitment of these 20,000 new police officers has also added, you know, to the problems that she was receiving. So I believe, you know, I mean, obviously the Met Police will be able to give you a better statement, but I do believe that they did lower the bars for these new recruits. And training obviously is a huge issue in the Met Police at the moment, and I believe that the new inspectors that had come in, you know, a small proportion of them haven't been sort of working towards the criteria they should be, and for that it's failed the Met Police. Even if it's just 1% or 2% of the officers, they have failed the Met Police, and that is coming out in the public. So, you know, like you've seen, there's been heavy coverage with the Sarah Everard, with the Bieber Henry, Nicole Smallman cases. They have sort of caused this huge stain to be put onto the Met Police even further than it was already being criticised.
It's difficult, though, isn't it, for anyone in charge like that, because she has inspired also tremendous loyalty from the ranks and files of police officers who say that generally it's always thought that she's got their back. And that's obviously a very important thing if you're going to lead a massive thing like the Met. On the other hand, you call for greater transparency. How can you really do both? I mean, clearly you should want to be able to do both, but it's clearly a very difficult job.
Yeah, and there needs to be a balance. I believe, I mean, from my opinion, I believe Cressida Dick, she should have sort of reached out to the local people and understood what their problems were, and she should have had a better empathetic way of delivering her service for the mistakes that the Met Police did make, and she should have been more accountable. I mean, it's fair enough for you to have the back of the Met, but it's also equally important for her to be accountable for the Met's mistakes. So she should have had a nice balance there, which I feel she's failed on that part. And I think anybody who's going to be going in her position needs to make, you know, needs to be fully aware of that they have to be accountable to the local public, and the local public will look out for that as well, because we do need to put our trust back into the Met.
Well, I was going to say, it's going to be very difficult for whoever takes over, isn't it? Because they've got to do what you say. There's got to be some root and branch reform, as we've been saying all morning, and yet you also need a leader who the rank and file are going to trust and support.
Absolutely, and I believe that's going to be a huge sort of looking point when they do the recruitment process. I know Sir Stephen House is looking after her position while they're recruiting somebody else, but I believe whoever the new person is has a lot of sort of work to do to bring that into his position. So, you know, again, accountability, reaching out to people, being, you know, empathetic with their problems, as well as obviously being a good leader within the Met as well. Both things are hugely crucial.
Do you think
so
it would
it's
matter?
a tough whoever's doing the job.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think it would matter if it were a man or a woman, or indeed a serving police officer or somebody from outside?
Well, I think Sadiq Khan and Priti Patel have both said they're opening it up as wide as possible for this position. So, I mean, I'd love to see another female lead because I think there's not enough, no matter how many we have, I believe, even though there has been a huge increase in the Met Police. But, you know, even if it's a man, even if it's somebody outside of the police force, as long as they understand the issues that Cressida did, you know, that were left on her resignation, I believe even if it's a man, if it's a woman, as long as it's somebody who's responsible, who's understanding of the accountability, then I believe we'll be okay.
Rashida Hamid, it's really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much. It's nice to talk to someone in lovely Bolton. How is Bolton today? Is it a nice day up there?
Bolton's lovely. It's been gorgeous this last weekend. So it's raining. It was raining a little bit yesterday evening, but it's lovely right now.
Long may it continue. Good to see you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Do stay with us. We've got plenty more to come after this.
And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK, and that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. We are live across the whole of the UK, aren't we?
The universe, I thought you were going to say.
Oh, we're very
I just
nearly.
feel like it sometimes, yeah.
Very nearly. We're online everywhere, on your TV, on your radio, on Oh, now, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, no. What?
Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I am techie. But we still haven't sorted out your car.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't.
I haven't, no.
I've got DAB in the car and I cannot figure out how to get GB News on it.
Got GB News, dead easy.
It's very techie, but I get to the point where I'm just so frustrated. I think, oh, never mind. I'll just put a record on or something.
What I will do...
Put a record on, that shows it.
Is I will come to your house.
Yeah.
And
right.
go and get in your
the car and we can
sort it out.
OK, you're on.
As long as you provide cups of tea.
I can do cups of tea. Is that right?
There you go. How about that? Problem solved. OK, now, 4 areas have been shortlisted to become the UK's City of Culture.
We might have to come back to talking about Durham. We might have to talk about that.
Yeah, because we've got a lovely VT we want to show you, but we can't do it yet.
Yeah, and actually Stephanie didn't know all about where certain parts of County Durham were used for the Harry Potter movies. But anyway, Stephanie's here, by the way. Stephanie Tetchy is here.
Good morning.
Now, morning.
We've been talking about Brooklyn Beckham and his wedding this morning, but you're fed up with that now. You've talked wedding enough.
Gosh, it feels like, you know, with celeb weddings, is like you talk about it non-stop for days on end.
I bet we'll have more, though, because, I mean, obviously the summer's coming.
Yeah, there is going to be.
Very good time for weddings.
Actually,
May, even.
You got in there first.
I did, yeah, I got in there first.
Such a romantic romantic, but I actually prefer divorce stories, actually. I like when it goes all wrong. That is when I love
Have you been watching
about
The Split?
Yes, and I saw... I saw Stephen, what's his name? Stephen Mannigan. Is
Yes.
that? Yeah, I saw him at a party earlier this week, and I was like, because I've just got into The Split, so I've already just.
Me too. I've never watched it before. Suddenly, I'm watching all 3 series.
I absolutely love it, and he was like, are you actually going to get back together with your wife in it? And he was like, I can't talk about it. And apparently the BBC...
They are going to do another series?
No, the BBC wanted them to do another series, and the cast and production said no, because he was like, how long can we keep on dragging out whether they're going to get back together or not? And I was like, oh, I can't.
Well, they did it with Ross and Rachel in Friends.
Oh, my God. Wasn't that like...
They did.
I loved it.
There's an interesting piece in one of the Sunday papers this morning about the fact there are some TV shows that are worth watching just for the interior design and the clothes.
Oh, yeah.
And that is one of them, isn't it?
That's Sex and the City for me.
Yeah.
Like, I can never get bored of all that fabulous New York interiors, the designs. Oh, it gets
it's the kitchen. There's this enormous kitchen.
Oh, nice.
In The Split.
Yeah.
Where everything happens, of course, in the kitchen. But it's absolutely massive kitchen.
That's where I'd spend me
Where
55.
did they film it? I want to know.
That is where I'd spend me 55 million
yes,
quid
that's
on a
true.
huge
I'd
kitchen.
have a lovely kitchen, space-age kitchen.
That would be very nice.
Yeah.
What is, apart from The Split,
yes,
what is good to watch at the moment? Because I've just finished Vikings, which I know is a few years old now, but it was 6 series. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But I've hit that point, like a lot of people do when you hit Prime or Netflix, that I've binged, I've finished, and I feel lost.
Have you watched the second series of Bridgerton?
No, I haven't seen the first.
So, start from the beginning, start from the first series with the dashing Duke of Hastings in there, played by Regé-Jean Page. And then you can move on to the second season, which has just come out now. And it stars Jonathan Bailey. He's like the star of the show at the moment. And he's in a love triangle with 2 sisters. So once you...
So good. I don't usually like period dramas.
Yeah.
They annoy me because I always think the actors are enjoying it more than I am because they're just loving dressing up.
Yeah.
But this is brilliant.
It
is so
really
good.
is good. For me, I was like, is it really going to be appealing as the first season? But I've been hooked yesterday after finishing the show, got into bed, and I was just watching Bridgerton back to back.
Oh, wow.
It's that good viewing, so get into it, get your popcorn, Stephen.
That needs to go.
That is what we would recommend.
And when that's not on, not that I don't listen to Lady Gaga. I was going to try and make a clever segue. I don't listen to Lady Gaga. I've got to be honest. I'm not into me pop music anymore. I'm too old.
And you're vintage.
Vintage. Thank you very much. But poor old Lady Gaga, who I admire very much, actually.
Yeah.
She had more issues with the dogs.
Yeah, so last year it was a really big story when 2 of her French bulldogs were kidnapped while her dog walker, Ryan Fisher, was out. And he was actually shot in the lung and they stole the dogs. Luckily, the dogs were returned because there was a big dog hunt. But the man that was jailed for it, James Howard Johnson, he's mistakenly been released.
Mistakenly?
Yes. It's a big error on LAPD. So they said it was a big error and he's now on the run. So they've released him by accident. I don't know if it was a case of mistaken identity. So now there's a big manhunt for this man who's actually standing set to go on trial for attempted murder. So the guy, the dog walker who was shot, Ryan Fisher, who's actually lost a part of his lung due to the shooting, he's come out and said, please hand yourself in so justice can be served. But I'm horrified. How in this day and age do you mistakenly let the wrong criminal out of prison?
I can't think.
It's
I mean, it's awful enough for that man, the victim, but Lady Gaga herself must be reviewing her security.
Yeah, and looking after those dogs as well. And, you know, the criminal's only 19 years old, so for him, it's probably his lucky day. But obviously, we know how American police, I don't think he'll get very far in the States, wherever he goes. But right now, as it stands, he is still on the run, and it's all the police's fault.
Oh, dear, that's grim, isn't it? Now, if you want to get more blinged up than you are already tonight, very fancy, it's the Oliviers tonight, isn't it? Who's in the running for anything good?
OK, so we've got Eddie. Cabaret is up for 11 awards, so they're quite for a big one. Life of Pi is up for 7 awards. We've got Anything Goes up for 9 awards, and Back to the Future, the musical, up for 7 awards. So tomorrow morning, we're probably going to see the likes of Lily Allen. She's up for Best Actress she was in a play called 222, The Ghost Story. We also have Emma Corrin, who was in The Crown. She's up for her role as Anna X. And then we've got Jessie Buckley. So Jessie Buckley.
Why do I know that name?
What films was she in? forgot the film she was
Another
in,
Night.
but yeah, she's up for her performance in Cabaret as well. So this is the
This
first...
suggests that the West End and theatres everywhere really are bursting back into life.
Oh my gosh, you know, during the pandemic, I really felt sorry for theatres because most other industries found a way to still survive, but the theatre industry was just wrecked completely. So this is actually a good celebration of the West End and all the musicals, the plays, the operas, which is so
I bet you
integral.
can't get a ticket anymore. Can you?
No.
I wanted to go and see Back to the Future. The musical.
Oh,
That'd
did
be
you?
such fun. Yeah. Couldn't get a ticket at all. They're almost sold out.
They all are. As soon as restrictions dropped, it was like sold out, which is
that
good.
was the thing. And Back to the Future opened in Manchester just before the pandemic, so it was open for about a week,
Opened
and then had to shut. And it was, I
yeah.
mean, that was awful.
And all those people put out of work.
Yeah, I know.
At least if the theatre, and this should be a celebration tonight of the theatre being back in business.
It will be, and it will never go out of business. Hopefully not again. Anything pandemic
have you seen
related.
Eddie Redmayne in Cabaret?
Yes, I have. Apparently, his character is top notch and stuff. And I've liked his change actually, moving from movies onto theatre.
Yeah.
It's quite not many actors can pull it off, but he does quite well.
It's interesting, isn't it, when they tread the boards, as they say. See, I'm not one for the theatre. I've never been one to really go to the theatre, but I did go to see a show a few years ago with a friend of mine. I can't remember what it was called now.
Yeah.
Something about a pie shop. Waitress.
Oh, right.
Okay,
It was Waitress.
Yeah.
And do you know what? It was
It is
brilliant.
It's nothing like the atmosphere.
I know, you leave with these really big endorphins after a good theatre show, and I like it when I can clap along, the musicals, all the best. What's your favourite musical?
I went to see Norma Desmond. What do I mean?
Norma Desmond.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. What do I mean?
I don't know.
Glenn Close was in it. She brought it
she's
to
a
the
great
West End
actor.
for a sort of very famous week.
I will Google it.
What am I thinking of? There are no theatrical people even in my ear.
No, I'm sorry.
What do I mean?
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard.
Thank you.
Sunset Boulevard
Thanks,
was
Google.
completely brilliant. I'm a fan of the very old movie.
Yeah.
But when Glenn Close brought it back to the West End a few years ago,
Yeah.
I think she was only here for about 2 or 3 weeks at the West
Yeah.
End. She was brilliant.
Oh.
Other than that, it has to be Phantom of the Opera. or Les Mis. It really has to be.
I haven't seen neither.
I've seen Phantom, actually. I have a long time ago.
Yeah.
But, that was
But
good.
it has to be those because you can take the whole family to those and you just sit enthralled. They
Yeah.
just carry you off. Brilliant. But, you know...
I want to see Kinky Boots again. I
Kinky
love
Boots is
Kinky
very
Boots because the
very
boots, just
good.
seeing all these men wearing these like 9-inch heels, I was like, you go. It was so good. So
Well, I think they deserve an award for being able to walk. And that, I can't imagine. I'd never...
42nd Street with all the tap dancing. That was wonderful.
God.
I just think live theatre is so brilliant. You might worry about, am I really going to like it? But when you get there, the atmosphere is just so fantastic.
just the creativity in this country of the arts is just so impressive. I know people say award shows, but I actually like the Olivier's because it's credit where it's deserved, and I think the theatre industry is always kind of like just looked over, but the talent, the
And it should be a
production.
little more serious than the Oscars.
Yeah, it is. I don't think there'll be no slapgates.
let's hope not.
It's going to be on ITV tonight.
ITV at 10:15.
At 10:15.
Right.
Who's
Lovely
hosting it?
stuff.
Oh, Jason Manford.
Oh, there you go.
Jason Manford.
Yeah, so
Oh,
he's
there you
back in
go.
action.
Oh, he is, isn't he? Stephanie, thanking you.
No worries.
You get an award for that. Well done.
Now, a woman from Scotland who is sponsoring a family of Ukrainian refugees says not enough is being done to help them arrive in the country.
She's off.
Oh, sorry, Stephanie's
Ailsa McKay is offering accommodation for 2 sisters and a teenage girl at a home in West Lothian, and our Scotland reporter David Donaldson went to meet her.
So my family have had a really difficult journey through 5 or 6 different European countries. They've been travelling more or less non-stop for about 3 weeks. Our visa applications were submitted on the 18th of March when the scheme opened, and we are still waiting to hear back on those.
It's been some journey for them, I understand, as well, through numerous countries.
So they, I've been in touch with the family since they left Kyiv. I think this was about the 16th or 17th of March. They ended up in Romania and then in Bucharest. From there they travelled to Budapest and Hungary. Because of the volume of people on the move, there's, I think the volunteers are doing their best, but there's a real incentive to keep people moving on. So from Budapest, they were put on a train to Munich in Germany. and they were only able to spend a night or two there before they were put on a train to Bologna in Italy. And they actually spent about a week or so in Pesaro in northern Italy before flying to Ireland on Saturday morning. And they're now currently somewhere northwest of Sligo in some disused council building, being housed with another Ukrainian family at the moment. But they have no heating at all, and they're currently sharing a single bed, so it's obviously not an ideal long-term situation for them to be in.
You've obviously been in touch with the family all along the way. What's been the sort of conversations you've had with them? Difficult,
because they're scared they're running out of money. It's very difficult to feel that you're constantly being moved on. So at the back of their minds, they're always thinking, I've got another day here. Will the visa come through? Because then I have to move again. So that's been more or less the gist of the conversations. Are you okay? Have you got somewhere to stay? Have you been fed? Do you know what you're doing tomorrow? It's been really basic. I mean, we've had quite a few conversations, but very much around the logistics of what's happening and timescales and what's happening next.
Do you think enough has been done to try and get these people over here and into homes, or do you think it's a process that needs to be speeded up somewhat?
Undoubtedly, it needs to be speeded up. There needs to be more transparency and feedback as to where applications are. I mean, I've spent more than 8 hours on hold to UKVI trying to get information, and when you do get through to someone, they can't tell you anything. They can't see the applications, they can't tell you where they are in the system, they can't give you any idea of timescales, they can't tell you where everything is okay. So you're just guessing, second guessing what's happening next. The forms themselves, I mean, I believe they've been simplified, but they're extremely difficult to fill out for a family who are on the move, on a mobile phone, on a data package, on a train. Personally, I feel that that the entire process is designed to be as obstructive and difficult as possible. I do appreciate that security checks need to be undertaken. I don't see why. I don't understand why we're the only European country where people can't enter the country first and then we undertake these checks. It's just inhumane.
Just had a couple of messages from people about what shows to watch.
Oh, yeah.
The Last Kingdom says Charles Fitzherbert and Amber Millington, so I'll give that a well. Cosmic said, I've just binge-watched Slow Horses with Gary Oldman and Christian Scott Thomas. Great characters, script and story, you'll love it.
Never even heard of
I won't be watching that for the very reason that it's only about 3 weeks ago I've got all the books, the whole series on audiobook, so I've only just listened to it on audiobook, but it is amazing. It's a great series.
It's called Slow Horses.
Slow Horses. It's about Slough House and MI like rejects from MI5. It's amazing. Really, really good. So,
Boys' Own stuff?
No. But I won't be watching the show just because I've only just read the book and I don't want to change my perception of the characters. But I bet it's great.
Well, do stay with us because we've got plenty more to talk about, including how a presidential candidate is giving Macron a run for his money in France. Don't go away.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
It is 9:42. Morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV and your radio.
Now, it's all going on all over the place because voters in France have been voting in the first round of the presidential elections this morning. Emmanuel Macron hopes for a second term, having long been tipped to win.
However, recent polls suggest his main rival, Marine Le Pen, has narrowed his lead somewhat.
So for the latest on this, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, columnist at the Daily Telegraph, joins us now. Very good morning, Anne-Elisabeth. Hello. Good morning. What's going to happen? What do you think? Things are changing all the time, aren't they?
Well, yes, and it's a very interesting election because I think everybody expected the election to be soon up for Emmanuel Macron. And in the last 10 days, his lead narrowed in the polls in such a way that he's now within the margin of error of Marine Le Pen coming in first in the first round. And it's a very narrow second, with most of the polls giving him only 51% against her 49%, which again is within the margin of error. So we don't know exactly how that is going to turn out. But it's really an upset because 2-3 weeks ago, he had reached something like 30% in a field of 12 people in the first round in the polls, and he was persuaded that his stance as a statesman going to Russia to speak with Vladimir Putin, being the statesman and not a candidate, would be very good for him. And now it seems that his strategy of almost not campaigning did not work out. He did give one single rally, but he lost momentum at the same time that the person most likely to give him essentially a black eye, Marine Le Pen, went up almost mechanically against him. It's really an upset, and there's an element of complacency for Emmanuel Macron that was not expected.
Is there a clear division amongst the French? I mean, because obviously Marine Le Pen, the National Front or the National Rally, whatever the party's been labelled at any point in time, it's always had a pretty strong presence. Is there a sense that the divisions are growing?
There certainly is, and there has been for some time, a kind of polarization, the way you find in Britain or in America or elsewhere, with people unhappy with the government that they've got and feeling, a whole part of public opinion that feels that it's not being listened to. And that led to the election of Donald Trump in America in 2016. It was part of the Brexit vote, and it's something that's also happening in France right now.
And how different would France be under Marine Le Pen?
Ooh, that is very interesting. We don't exactly know for many reasons. First of all, because until this election, nobody believed that anybody from the National Rally would get elected. It used to be National Front, now National Rally. What's interesting about Marine Le Pen is that there has always been a Project Fear when her father or herself were coming close in the second round. You know that the first round is for the voters to choose between whatever candidates come up, and the second round is to pick between the first two, the top two. And Marine Le Pen has come now twice In the top two, her father came once, but he was so far away it was impossible. It was 20 years ago with Jacques Chirac. And now there's a possibility that she might get in, and that's entirely different. So there's sort of, France will be a dictatorship if you vote for Marine Le Pen, and therefore you can't vote for Marine Le Pen. And to be honest, I mean, she still has very unpalatable stances, but she has, quote unquote, detoxified her party and her own personal image so much that people say, no, well, you tried to frighten us many times, but essentially it ends up with us in the second round voting for somebody we don't want to vote to, for with clenched teeth. And many people now say, and not just about Marine Le Pen in the first round, about the extreme left candidate. We have a Jeremy Corbyn-like left-wing candidate called Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's had incredible traction. He's gained something like 6 points in the past 2 weeks. And that's really because the electorate, left and right, is absolutely fed up with the situation in which they feel that it's not a choice. It's by default.
Anne-Elizabeth, really good to talk to you. Thank you.
It's a long process yet, isn't it? There are several rounds in the French elections. It'll go on for a bit. Meanwhile, here, around 1,000 activists are planning to meet in Hyde Park in London today as part of a week of action. For more on this, Insulate Britain spokesperson Oliver Rock joins us now. Hello, Oliver. What are you planning for today and for the coming week?
Oh, yeah. Hi, good morning. I guess maybe there's been a bit of a miscommunication. The rally in Hyde Park is Extinction Rebellion.
And you are Insulate Britain, so tell us what you are going to do.
Well, I mean, this week I'm going to go, once this interview is finished, I'm going to go to the park just to see who's there, and I might sort of give some talks to people who are new to it, because obviously I've had experience with the Insulate Britain campaign of taking action.
Do you think, Extinction Rebellion with this, it's a conventional rally, they're doing what is sort of legal and allowed. Do you think that makes a bigger impact than what you did? I mean, obviously you got an awful lot of headlines, but you broke the law, you landed up in prison for a couple of months as a result, and as a result of that, you don't get public sympathy, even though you may be making a valid point.
I mean, I think that Extinction Rebellion are also committed to civil disobedience, which means the peaceful, non-violent breaking of the laws of the state. Like, there was quite a few people arrested yesterday evening in Trafalgar Square for refusing to leave.
Yeah, it's not quite the same as blocking the M25, though, is it? I mean, is that a path that you would consider pursuing to try to achieve your aims?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Insulate Britain, we were taking more higher stakes civil disobedience, which means risking prison. Yeah, and I guess it's part of the theory of how change happens. Without this sort of friction and this non-violent confrontation, then we're unlikely to see the changes that we desperately need to see in this society.
Are you prepared to do something that would risk prison again?
I mean, I've got like 7 criminal charges from taking part in Insulate Britain, so I guess I'm already at risk of going back to prison again for Insulate Britain.
No, it's interesting. Well, I mean, whether people watching agree with you or not, Oliver, you're certainly principled in what you do. Good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you.
I mean, I agree with a lot of what Insulate Britain wants to achieve. I don't agree with the methods they've used to do it. I think this is the problem you have. I mean, more insulation's got to be a good, sensible thing, hasn't it? But anyway, your views on that, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We give all sides to all stories.
Quite interesting, though, because that was that story I just noticed in The Observer about one thing that you'd never think of, really, has been hit by the shortage of coal because we're closing coal mines, but also because we can't import Russian coal, for instance, at the moment, is, all those vintage railways.
Oh,
like the steam railways.
Like the Settle to Carlisle.
Yeah, all those beautiful railways that presumably would be looking forward to, healthy business over the coming summer. Apparently apparently they're very, very short of coal, and we may not be able to see them doing their thing.
Yeah, oh, that's a shame. Loads of you getting in touch this morning. Sue says, I wanted to say how the Boris visit to Ukraine makes my family proud to be British. Whatever our political opinions, he represents our country and has endorsed our support to Ukraine. Thank you, Boris Johnson.
Alex says the same thing. I'm so proud of our Prime Minister and his visit to Kiev. I've also heard reports that Ukrainian soldiers shout God save the Queen when they're firing their weapons at Russian tanks.
Yeah.
Don't know why they'd shout God save the Queen, but I can understand the bullishness of it.
Yeah. Well, if it's a motivator.
Yeah.
Just got to say as well, Jules in Andover. Oh, I like Andover. When I go and sort your car out, your car radio, Jules says, can I record it? Because just like you, she doesn't have a clue and gets very frustrated with not being able to operate her radio properly.
Are you any good at pulling the dents out of cars as well?
No.
Oh, shame. Because I had an argument with a wheelie bin.
Oh, right, no. I'd be a bit like, if you've ever seen it, it'd be like that episode of Father Ted. It would not be good. It would not be good. You'd end up with a mess. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through. Actually, I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm back right through till next Sunday, so stay in touch. You're going to be in from Wednesday.
I'm going to be in from Wednesday, yes.
So you've got more of Steve and Anne than you can shake a stick at.
Yeah, but before we go home and just spend the rest of the afternoon sleeping or watching the telly.
Yes, bit of both.
Yes, there's a lot of showbiz and sport around.
Yeah, Aidan McGee and Stephanie Tetchy are here. Morning. Aidan, what are you going to kick us off with?
Yeah, the Australian Grand Prix has just finished. Remember, we were just out of time last time when I was about to tell you. Well, it's probably better we do it now because it has actually finished. It's reached a resolution. Charles Leclerc has won in front of Lewis Hamilton. He finished fourth. Hamilton started fifth on the grid. He was moaning about his car yesterday, compared it to a viper and a rattlesnake, and he said it's very spiteful. So, I don't know, people are starting to look and see, well, is his amazing relationship with Mercedes about to come to an end? If the bit of kit that carries him over the line isn't very reliable for him, then you have to ask questions. But he has finished fourth. It was a British third, fourth and fifth. George Russell in third, Lewis Hamilton fourth, Lando Norris in fifth. But it's a foregone conclusion, really, in terms of the race from now on. That was Saudi was a couple of weeks ago. Australia was today. Charles Leclerc well out in front for Ferrari. In terms of football, massive game today. Liverpool against Manchester City at the Etihad. It could decide the destination of the Premier League title today. It's that big. We're talking at a TV audience of about 150 million. We've got the Masters as well entering a final day. We had what was called Moving Day yesterday, which that's where you sort out the wheat from the chaff. The ones who look as if they're unassailable sometimes come unstuck. That didn't quite happen with Scotty Scheffler. He was 6 shots ahead yesterday. He's now only 3. He could be getting nervous in this last home straight on the Sunday. Some things can really go wrong pressure-wise and mentally to players. So we'll see how he holds out. And, yeah, just a huge weekend. We had the National yesterday, Noble Yates, 50-1.
Did you have a flutter, Stephanie?
Oh, gosh, I lost all my bets.
Did you?
Yeah.
Go on.
I think I put a bet on Snowdress Leopard.
Yes, me too.
I was just going by the name.
Me too.
Snowdress Leopard was interesting because she'd had 2 years out having a foal. So she could have become the first mare.
That's why I liked her as well. So I don't like gambling, actually.
No.
I'm a bit of a tight purse when it comes to that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Once I put £2 on it and lose it, I'm like, that £2 could have gone on something else.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's quite right. It's the same way the house always wins with gambling.
Yeah, but if you can't win it if you're not in it. It's like the lottery. Isn't it?
One of the floor managers here told me he won £300 just placing a bet for £6.
50-1, yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's highly irritating.
To remind everybody, I mean, it's a showbiz story as well, isn't it? Yeah. Remind us who the jockey was.
So, Sam Whaley-Cohen, 39 years old, 50-1 his horse, Noble Yates. It's his last race. The horse was only bought by his father 2 weeks ago. No amateur has won this race for 30... This is the most famous race in the world, OK? Everyone, you think of horse racing, you think of the National. 32 years since an amateur won it. What an accomplished individual as well. I mean, he's
but also a friend of the royal.
Yeah, apparently he got Kate and Will
he got them back together. Yeah, he got them back together. He doesn't talk about it very much because he doesn't like to credit himself with it, but he did go to school with Kate, as we touched on a couple of hours ago.
Yeah.
And apparently when they were having problems
in the very early stages of their relationship,
he was the one who taught them back into it. But he's also a dentist, with 250 practices and employing 4,000
I
people.
know, isn't that astonishing? How lucky. Do you think it's fair, though, Aidan? Because then you've got a lot of riders who are, professionally trained and did not buy their horse 2 weeks ago.
No, but
so do you think he won it fair and square?
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's a level playing field. It's not, because he's got lots of jumps.
Oh.
But yeah, listen. It doesn't happen often. He's an amateur. It's the first time in 32 years.
It's wonderful for him because it was his last race.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
We had a
Never
massive
going
story
to race
last
again
year
anyway, and
with
he
Rachel
made it.
Blackmore.
He went out on a win.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. So I do think it was fair. If you win it as an amateur, you've had to earn it.
Yeah,
that's true. More credit to you.
Get back to the dentist.
For you next year.
Yeah, you could see me riding away.
Yes, get practicing.
Anyway, enjoy the Olivier's tonight.
I will do, and
Are
I'll
you
be
going?
back here. Oh, yes, of course, Stephen.
Oh,
Where
wow.
else will I be? I'll be back with you in the morning, though.
Oh, will you?
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Ready?
I will look forward to that. It's worth coming in for that. Thank you,
And I'll be
Stephanie.
watching from under me duvet.
Lucky.
You'll be asleep.
I might not be asleep. I'll watch you. I keep an eye on you when I'm away. You know.
First day off in 12 days for me, so I'll be asleep as well.
Oh yes, you've had a right good slog
Our
there, so you
sleeping
sleep well.
beauties.
Right, that is it from us, but stay tuned because coming up next, it's the political correction. And looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking mostly fine and dry, though it is cold and largely frosty to begin with.
So, after a bright and sunny morning, towards lunchtime across the southwest of England, the cloud will begin to move in, turning the sunshine fairly hazy. Temperatures reaching double figures, though.
Plenty of blue skies across London and the southeast through a frosty start. Temperatures will rise to about 11 Celsius by midday.
For Wales, the sunshine will be on the hazy side, though it should remain dry and bright, turning breezy towards the west coast.
A bit of a frosty morning, but it will be sunny for the Midlands. Some light winds there. Temperatures a little bit on the chilly side. Highs of just 10 by midday. Sunshine will turn hazy later on.
And after a cold and frosty start, northern England will have a dry morning with some sunny spells. Temperatures will slowly climb towards double figures as we approach midday, winds staying light for all.
Now, Scotland's going to see a mix of sunny spells and showers, some of them falling as snow over the higher ground. Elsewhere, fine and dry with spells of sunshine.
Increasing cloud across Northern Ireland this morning, with patchy rain moving northeastwards as we approach midday. Temperatures reaching 8 Celsius, and it will become breezier too, especially in the west.
So through the rest of the day, most places dry, but rain will affect northwestern parts of the UK, and that's how your weather is shaping up.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and